Chapter 95. Waiting for someone was indeed an anxious and irritating thing, especially when it was someone he didn't know. Jiahua was a person who valued efficiency. As time passed, he and Fels just stood there in the room, unable to do anything. It was a very uncomfortable feeling. Fortunately, Fels was older and had a higher status, so he was able to talk to Breezy about some additional topics. Although it was an additional topic, it was actually about the Black Gold base. The identities of the people who escaped that day have been identified. They are Vader and Ding Ming, Fels said. Vader is the vice leader of the surprise attack mercenary group stationed at the Black Gold base. Ding Ming is a laborer in the base. His number is 8028. Breezy paced back and forth beside the fountain. He still had that half-smile on his face. Captain Fels, don't you think this is a little interesting? A laborer actually escaped with the leader of a mercenary group. What do you think? Fels' expression was very serious. According to my experience, there are only two reasons for this. One is that they're facing a great danger together, and the other is that they have a common interest. He was indeed an experienced captain. He pointed out the root of the problem. Breezy nodded. Very few people know about the solar eclipse. It is impossible for people below our level to know about it, but these two people knew about it beforehand. Jiahua's expression darkened. There is only one possibility. This Ding Ming or Vader. One of them must have entered the underground battleship and knows about the battle 15 years ago. Fels said, but even if they know about what happened 15 years ago, they can't help us know where the memory is. Jiahua's gaze fell on the screen. It seems that only Miss Julie's wristwatch can give us the answer. Breezy nodded. This is also why I asked Miss Bing to come over. His gaze fell directly on the door of the room. At that moment, the door opened automatically and a beautiful figure walked in. Even though Jiahua had heard of her many times, she had never imagined that the Miss Bing would have such a stunning appearance. She was neither tall nor short. She was only 7 meters tall. What was certain was that she was not an artificial beauty because she did not have any makeup on her face. She walked in without any makeup. However, it was this face that made Jiahua's breathing stop at this moment. This face was really too beautiful. So beautiful that it was soul-stirring. So beautiful that it was impossible to have any blasphemous thoughts. The moment she walked in, it was like a goddess from a dream had broken into your world. The whole world's eyes were focused on her alone. However, Miss Bing was just like her name. She was simply too cold because there was no expression on her face at all. It was as if she ignored everything around her. Jiahua finally understood the meaning of the phrase, as beautiful as a peach, as cold as ice. This was completely tailor-made for Miss Bing. Miss Bing's clothes were also very unique. She wore a pure green qipao with a high collar. In this day and age, this kind of dress was an antique among antiques. It could only be seen in art galleries. Almost no one wore it. It was not because the style was old, but because not many people dared to wear it. It was because they could not wear it. Even if they dared to wear it, they would look like a clown. However, when this dress was worn by Miss Bing, Jiahua immediately thought of an orchid in an empty valley or a plum blossom on an ice mountain. Dignified, luxurious, elegant, gentle, and beautiful, it was all in one body. This qipao had long sleeves, so only Miss Bing's small hand were exposed. Just by looking at her hands, Jiahua felt that it was a perfect work of art. He didn't dare to imagine how it would feel when those jade hands held his hands, because he couldn't imagine it. In front of someone like Miss Bing, you would only feel ashamed of your own inferiority. You wouldn't have the slightest intention of offending her. He now understood why young Master Phone was so determined to wait. This kind of woman was definitely worth waiting for. Jiahua stood there in a daze, but young Master Phone was not startled. He politely extended his hand. Miss Bing, this way, please. Miss Bing did not pay attention to him. She walked in front of the screen and stopped. The images on the wrist device started to play again. The images were very messy, but some scenes could still be seen clearly. Julie walked down from the Mystic Bird transport ship. The general on the rooftop greeted her with a flattering smile. In the base's VIP room, Julie was drinking red wine. At the same time, she was giving orders. seal off the PC-35 area, and forbid anyone from entering or leaving. For the first time, Ding Meng's file was carefully studied. Along with it were the files of Little Four, Bamboo Pole, Vader, and Machine Gun. Among them, Ding Meng's information was highlighted with a red line, 90% related to memory. In the damp tunnel of the underground mine, Vader led the way in front, while Julie followed behind unhurriedly. In the middle of the experiment hall, Bamboo Pole finally self-destructed and died. Julie was probably blown away by the explosion as well. The image was spinning and blurring. It was still the experiment hall. Julie should be lying on the ground. A dark golden light descended from the sky, followed by Ding Meng's murderous face. The last image was still Ding Meng's file being pulled out. However, this time, the image was very shaky. It could be seen that Julie used her trembling fingers to press Command Center number 3 with all her strength. Then, she clicked send and added a message, memory. The moment the message was sent, the image was cut off with a click. Countless dots jumped on the screen. At this point, the information on the wrist device had finished playing. This process played for a full 20 minutes. During this time, Miss Bing did not say a word. She did not even bat an eyelash. She stood there like an iceberg. Even the air around her seemed to have frozen. Only then did Jia Hua realize that Miss Bing's origin ability belonged to the ice attribute. Moreover, Miss Bing's control over her was perfect, almost not revealing a trace of her aura. If it wasn't for the moment when the scene ended and she was slightly absent-minded, even with Jia Hua's advanced warrior strength, he wouldn't have been able to sense it. Jia Hua was shocked. Feng Xiao's secretary's strength was not below his. It seemed that this woman was not just for show. He was still in a daze, but Miss Bing suddenly turned around and lowered her head. Her voice was somewhat pained. "Young Master Feng, please observe 3 minutes of silence for Miss Julie." She did her best. Feng Xiao sighed sadly. "Yes, Miss Julie is a good warrior of mine. She is worthy of my respect." These 3 minutes were unbearable because the air was filled with a heavy pressure. Fells opened his mouth and said, "We checked the event recorder on Black Gold 3. The people who drove the Black Hawk 5A to chase Ding Meng were Officer Baines and Miss Rebecca. Their target was Nebula TCP-121. Unfortunately, they have not returned yet." Everyone understood what he meant. If they had not returned yet, then it was likely that they had met with misfortune. Chu Yifeng's gaze fell to the side. "Miss Bing, what do you think?" Miss Bing's face was expressionless. The Black Hawk 5A flew into the observation range of the TCP-121 Nebula. They first destroyed the 703C Swordfish transport ship of the Shinda Aerospace Company's 101 fleet. Then they encountered the Nuashing Empire's Interstellar Patrol, fleet numbered NX-3DDT-51. The commander was Lei Zhan, a major. When they were escaping, they were unfortunately caught by the Skywalker assault ship. If I'm not mistaken, the two of them should have died. Fayers raised his head in surprise. He really couldn't believe that this delicate girl in front of him actually had such a clear channel for information that he couldn't even find out. He suddenly had a strange thought. Could it be that Miss Bing has a spy in the Empire's military? Chu Yifeng frowned. "Can I understand it this way? First, we can confirm that this worker called Ding Meng has a lot to do with the memory. Second, Ding Meng was also killed during the escape, and he died in the Empire's territory?" Miss Bing said coldly, "Young Master Feng, there is no problem with your understanding, but there is a big misunderstanding." Chu Yifeng was very respectful. He lowered his head and said, "Please enlighten me." Chapter 96. Miss Bing said calmly, "Our ultimate goal is the memory chip. Based on Miss Julie's experience in the base, we have confirmed that the memory chip has been found." The other 3 nodded in unison. No one could deny this. There are a total of 5 people who are related to the memory chip. Laborer Ding Meng 8028, Laborer Little 42187, Laborer Bamboo 1677, Laborer Machine Gun 0211, and the vice leader of the surprise attack mercenary group Vader. Miss Bing continued, "Among them, Bamboo Pole has been proven to be Shang Wu, a spy from the Empire. He has been eliminated by Miss Julie. As for the other 3 people, Machine Gun, Vader, and Little Four, there are sufficient facts to prove that they are all dead. Chu Yifeng pondered and said, the remaining Ding Ming should also be dead in theory, but there is no concrete evidence to prove that he is dead. Miss Bing did not answer him. Instead, she turned on the wristwatch on her wrist. Ding Ming's file was called out and displayed on the screen. In our records, this Ding Ming came from the top 45 Camp 88 of the Bramble planet of the Linda system. Other than that, there is no record of him at all. Jiahua seemed to have understood something and quickly said, Miss Bing, are you saying that this person's background is suspicious? Miss Bing said coldly, I thought so too at first. Jiahua asked, is there a problem? Miss Bing said, in the citizen records of the Holy Grail Federation and the Norse Empire, there are as many as 420,000 people with the name Ding Ming. However, after comparing the images, we found that there is no match at all. He is very likely to be a galactic refugee. First quickly came to this conclusion. Miss Bing finally nodded. According to the information I found in the refugee camp, this Ding Ming was taken in on Cypress Grove half a year ago. The detailed note is that he is no longer able to move and was sold to the shelter by the black market merchants. Cypress Grove was located behind the Holy Grail Federation. It was a black market paradise for galactic pirates, refugees, and refugees. Since Ding Ming was taken in there, it proved that he was a galactic refugee. Miss Bing suddenly said something shocking. I also investigated. Ding Ming arrived on Cypress Grove a year ago. There is a famous galactic pirate group on Cypress Grove called the Extreme Pirate Unit. Furs said, I know this notorious galactic pirate unit. As long as there is profit, they will do any business. Miss Bing said, a year ago they robbed a caravan on Leiji Planet 3511. Ding Ming was in the caravan. This planet was still not under the jurisdiction of the Federation or the Empire, but it was closer to the Thorn Planet. No one knew what happened in between, but the key was that Miss Bing was able to find out such secret information. Even Furs could not help but look at her in a new light. No wonder young Master Feng thought highly of her. She was indeed capable. At this time, Miss Bing lowered her head and operated the wristwatch. The screen switched to a galactic map. A red line shuttled back and forth between different cursor points. It was like a strange galactic route, constantly wandering, detouring, and bouncing back. It had a special feature, which was that it never entered the territory of the Federation or the Empire. Finally, the line stopped at a light spot in front of the Holy Grail Federation. Everyone present knew the location of this spot, the border between the Holy Grail Federation and the Devourer Sector, the Zyrtl Sector. These are the places that Ding Ming has been to in the past 3 years. There are a total of 7 spots. Miss Bing explained, according to the information I know, the Zyrtl Starfield is not his original place of origin, but I can guarantee that no one knows more than I do. Jiahua gasped. Looking at the situation, this Ding Ming seems to have come from the Devourer Sector. But that can't be right. No human can survive in the Devourer Sector. Miss Bing replied coldly, I'm afraid it's not that simple. Chu Yifeng nodded slightly to show his approval. He also saw that Ding Ming's route seemed strange and messy, but in fact, it started from the periphery and gradually approached the Federation and the Empire. Jiahua looked up in surprise. Did he pass through the Devourer Sector and come from outer space? No one in the room could answer his question. The vastness of the universe was far beyond human imagination. There were countless civilizations in outer space. The Devourer Sector and the Frogman Nation were both alien civilizations, but no one could be sure that there were no humans in outer space. This Ding Ming's origin was indeed suspicious, but the key was, where did he come from? This person seemed to have appeared out of thin air. No one knew where he came from, and no one knew his destination. For a moment, the room was silent again. The 4 people's expressions were a bit ugly. After all, for the 4 of them, not knowing the origin of a refugee worker was undoubtedly a bit embarrassing. Fayers silently watched the screen. Suddenly, he said, actually, there's a pattern to his route. Jiahua was curious. What pattern? Fayers sighed. Didn't you notice? The route he took was all black markets, slave markets, refugee camps, war zones, ruins, trash planets. There was not a single place that was slightly normal. Jiahua stared at the screen. That's really the case. This is simply the route of an ascetic monk. Fayer sighed again. This person was able to come to Black Gold Base in the end. I'm thinking that his life must not have been easy. This was also true. An interstellar refugee used 3 years to walk such a complicated route from the Zirtal star field to the Dome star field. Who knew how many hardships, and natural disasters he had to face to reach this place? And this place was another hell on Earth. What was he trying to do? Chu Yifeng, who had not spoken until now, finally understood Miss Bing's meaning. He slowly said, "A person like this won't die so easily. Although some things can't be proven, some people can't be proven by events." Jiahua and Fayers also understood. This Ding Ming probably didn't die in the pursuit of Baines and the others. Instead, he survived the battle. This was simply a miracle. Miss Bing coldly said, "I always feel that there are 2 kinds of people who won't die so easily. One is the lucky ones, and the other is the brave ones. It doesn't matter if they're an ordinary person or an origin ability user." Chu Yifeng respectfully nodded. "Thank you for your advice." Jiahua also nodded and followed the analysis. If Ding Ming didn't die, then he must have entered the territory of the Empire. He couldn't have returned in the direction of the Federation. Fayers continued. The Empire's patrol fleet won't deal with origin ability users, but he's not a citizen of the Empire. I'm guessing that the Empire's fleet will send him to the nearest planet for a simple settlement. The nearest planet is planet TT-12, which is a peripheral planet of the Empire. Miss Bing pressed the wrist device again, and the image on the screen finally changed. It showed Ding Ming's face and information. Name, Ding Ming. Gender, male. Age, 20. Identity, interstellar refugee. Origin, planet TT-12. Jinfeng Oasis, Chiaoza City. Qingxi Village, Yuanshan Farm. Qingxi Village. Note, outsider, no bad record. Jiahua and Fayers looked at Miss Bing with deep admiration. This secretary of young Master Feng was indeed a capable person. Her thoughts were clear, her deductions were reasonable, her vision was shrewd, and her information was accurate. Chu Yifeng sighed. "Thank you very much this time." Miss Bing was expressionless. "It's my job. Young Master Feng, you don't have to be so polite." Chu Yifeng then turned to Jiahua and Fayers. "Thank you, Brother Hua and the captain, for your efforts these past few days." Jiahua and Fayers tactfully excused themselves. This was because the following conversation between young Master Feng and Miss Bing was bound to be confidential. Although their positions were high, they weren't high enough to know the entire plan. When working in a big company, it was very important to know when to advance and when to retreat. You would know what you should know sooner or later, but you would never know what you should know. If you had to know, then you wouldn't be able to bear the consequences. Chapter 97. As soon as Jiahua and Fels left, Miss Bing stopped talking. She stood there quietly like an ice sculpture. Chu Yifeng was still pacing back and forth by the fountain, as if he was thinking of a countermeasure. Since things had turned out this way, then the previous strategy would no longer work. The key problem now was that Ding Ming was in the Norse Empire, and Chu Yifeng had no way to deal with Ding Ming. Thus, he could only ask the think tank beside him, "In your opinion, what should our next step be?" Miss Bing would only speak when it came to work. "I think there are a few things that you should pay attention to, young Master Feng." Chu Yifeng nodded slightly. "Please speak." Miss Bing said, "First, all signs indicate that Ding Ming has become an origin ability user from an ordinary person in just a month, and his strength has increased very quickly. Among the group of people he killed, Leopard, Wolf, Machine Gun, Sadler, and Julie, none of them were weak." Chu Yifeng pondered and said, "This is obviously a change brought to him by the memory chip. We can be certain that the memory chip can quickly increase a person's strength." Miss Bing said, "Second, according to the records of the Black Gold Base, Ding Ming is stubborn and unmoved by force or persuasion. I judge that he is a person with a strong will." Chu Yifeng also agreed. "No matter who it is, after wandering for a few years like him, They will either become numb or become strong. Miss Bing said, "That's not the most important thing. The key is that threats and promises have no effect on him. We can't do what we did in the past. We can't rob him openly or buy him at high price. That won't work. We should use another strategy." Julie and Sadler's encounter had undoubtedly proved this point. Ding Ming's true strength was not in his martial prowess, but he was smart and cunning enough. He was always able to come up with clever ideas and use his brain in a deadlock situation. Miss Bing continued, "We also have people in the Empire, but none of them are on planet TT-12. Chu Yifeng said, "Where's the nearest one?" Miss Bing looked at him indifferently. "Right now, we're the closest to Ding Ming." Chu Yifeng frowned. "Other than us? Who else?" Miss Bing said, "Apart from us, the nearest one to reach planet TT-12 will take 3 months." Chu Yifeng suddenly stopped talking. 3 months was something he could not accept no matter what. Using 3 months just to reach a planet of the Empire was not only a waste of precious time for someone like him, but it was also an unforgivable act of stupidity. Miss Bing seemed to have guessed his thoughts. The higher-ups are willing to use 15 years to build the black gold base and excavate the memory, but you are unwilling to use 3 months to quickly reach the location of the memory. Chu Yifeng's expression darkened. "I'm different from them. They have too many concerns and too many standpoints. That's why things ended up like this. I'm not someone who likes to clean up the mess." Miss Bing let out a rare sigh. "Then there are some things that you are not fated to have. There's a saying that goes, if it is fated, it will be there. If it is not fated, do not force it." These words seemed to imply something else. Chu Yifeng couldn't help but raise his head to look at her. Every time he saw her as cold as ice, there would be an unknown raging fire in his heart. But very quickly, his reason and pride quickly suppressed this ball of fire. Miss Bing also admired him for this. Chu Yifeng's eyes were burning with passion at first, but it only flashed for a moment, and he quickly regained his usual calmness. "You don't seem to be very optimistic recently," Chu Yifeng said coldly. Miss Bing's tone was even colder. "I can't be optimistic at all," Chu Yifeng asked. "Is it because of me?" "That's not it." Miss Bing sighed again. "I just want to remind you that if we depart now, we will be able to enter the Norse Empire's territory in a week. About 10 days later, we will be able to enter the TT-12 star sector. Of course, this is very risky. Furthermore, with your identity, it is unlikely that you will be able to enter the Empire." Chu Yifeng was silent. In fact, he had thought about this before. It was reasonable to say that the higher the risk, the greater the reward. Although the existence of the memory chip was worth the risk, if the operation failed, the consequences would be even more severe than the destruction of Black Gold Base and Bane's death. No matter how many times he said it, it was still the same logic. He also had the same problem that all big shots had, suspicion. Miss Bing continued, "Young Master Feng, there is one more thing I want to remind you. Shang Wu died at the hands of Julie." Chu Yifeng hesitated. "Are you referring to the spy from the Empire who disguised himself as a laborer?" Miss Bing said, "Since you know that he is a spy, then the enemy must also be paying attention to the memory chip. Shang Wu had an affair with Vader, so he must have been trying to communicate with the enemy through Vader. Now that Vader is dead, the communication has been cut off for more than 2 months. If you were the commander of the enemy, what would you do?" Chu Yifeng was startled. He suddenly realized the seriousness of the situation. Since Shang Wu was disabled and forced to return to the Black Gold Base, how could his opponent be weak? Chu Yifeng thought to himself. Chu Yifeng was startled and suddenly realized the seriousness of the situation. If he were the enemy, now that the communication had been cut off for 2 months, it meant that Shang Wu had met with an accident. There was only one possibility that could make Shang Wu meet with an accident, and that was the discovery of the memory chip. Since everyone was here for the memory chip, no one's intelligence system was useless. Perhaps the enemy had already found Ding Ming. Thinking of this, Chu Yifeng's heart sank. Time was more pressing than he thought. Miss Bing said, "There is one more thing. Even if the memory chip is not on Ding Ming, at least Ding Ming knows some of the secrets in the memory chip. In just 1 month in Black Gold Base, he broke through from an ordinary person to an Origin ability user. Now that 2 months have passed, he is very likely to be a warrior. If this drags on, the situation will become more complicated. You're right. Chu Yifeng suddenly became spirited. His eyes revealed a hint of sharpness. If this drags on for a year and a half, that kid will be free to mingle around and become a giant in the future, then we can only look at the ocean and sigh. Miss Bing pressed the wrist device, and the interstellar map changed again. Starting from the Dome Star, a zigzag route moved irregularly in space. The destination was star TT-12 in the TCP-121 nebula. Miss Bing explained while operating the map. I have already investigated the patrol route of the Norse Empire's fleet in this area. If we follow this route, we will not alarm anyone. Chu Yifeng did not say anything more. He coldly issued an order. Let's set off now. Destination, star TT-12. Chapter 98. It was a quiet night again. The sound of the wind blowing through the wheat was as gentle as the sea. The wooden hut looked like a reef by the sea under the night sky. Even though the reef wasn't very nice and was even a little ugly, Ding Ming felt that this place was the most pleasant to him because this wooden hut in Yuanshan Farm was practically his home. The Listen Academy had given him a holiday, so he had returned here as soon as he could. He had also brought back a crate of nutrient fluids with a total of 200 vials, each with a capacity of 3,000 plus daika. This was a gift from Chu Shaoqing before he left. It could be considered a friendship investment, and the value of the nutrient fluids wasn't cheap at all. It was almost 800 star coins. Ding Ming didn't care much about money, but Ding Ming never refused to give up on nutrient fluids. He couldn't refuse them at all. As long as he had enough, he would immediately immerse himself in cultivation. The construction of the 5th origin of the Diamond Star technique had been completed a week ago. The diamond tetrahedron in his heart had already formed a new polyhedron, and it didn't feel any different from before. However, the success of the construction this time brought about another benefit, and that was an increase in the development of his brain, which greatly increased his telekinesis. Back in the wooden hut, Ding Ming could use his telekinesis to lift up the straw stool and wooden table, allowing them to float freely in the air. However, things were different now. At this moment, Ding Ming was still sitting cross-legged on his bed with his eyes closed. With him as the center, a wooden sword made from a stick suddenly shot up from the ground as if it had been enchanted. It flew about chaotically in the air with a swishing sound. This was the solitary sword of the Zhao clan and the 12 forms of the heavenly sword that Zhao Yu had taught him. Of course, he could only practice according to the moves and use his telekinesis to control the wooden sword. He had no choice but to use the wooden sword. With his current strength, even an ordinary low-grade alloy sword wouldn't be able to withstand the powerful infusion of Origin energy. As long as he used Origin energy to control the sword would immediately melt. If he wanted a good sword, not only would he need an expensive multi-element alloy sword, he would also need an ancient sword that was suitable for this sword technique. Not to mention that the Listen Academy didn't have such a sword. Even if you had enough money, you wouldn't be able to find one in the entire Autumn Pool City. Little Rascal was a little dejected. I feel like learning the sword art is as good as not learning it at all. It won't be of any use at all. However, Ding Ming did not think so. As the saying went, it was never a burden to have more skills. As long as it was a martial art technique, he was willing to learn it. Moreover, he was able to learn it quite well. Of course, the Diamond Star technique had always been his main focus. His current goal was to reach the 6th origin. The 6th point was located at the very center of the heart. Its internal structure could no longer be described as complex. Just observing it took Zhang Heng 2 whole days. If the 5th point was like an exquisite palace, then the 6th point was like a magnificent city. There were too many aspects involved, and its importance was self-evident. However, at this point in his cultivation, Ding Ming was no longer curious, happy, and excited. Instead, he became serious and dignified. During his time at the Listen Academy, He gradually gained a new and systematic understanding of cultivation techniques. Most origin ability users in the Empire had a basic cultivation technique of 3 stars. As for how high one's combat strength was, it depended on their level, martial arts techniques, secret manuals, battle armor, and other cultivation techniques. Those who cultivated a 4-star cultivation technique did not have to worry about money, at least. This was why many origin ability users were divided into different groups of people from their initial stages of cultivation. Chu Xiaoqing's tenacious nirvana art was something that the Chu family had spent a lot of effort to collect for 3 years before they were able to obtain it. Other than her, no one else in the Listen Academy had a 5-star cultivation technique. This also meant that she was the only one with a 5-star cultivation technique in the entire Chiozei city. There were probably less than 10 people like her in the entire TT 12-star system. Ding Ming was currently constructing the 6th origin, which meant that it was at least a 6-star cultivation technique. He wasn't sure how strong it was, but Chu Xiaoqing had told him that the strongest Esper in the entire Norse Empire cultivated a 9-star cultivation technique. The highest cultivation technique in the Empire was a 10-star cultivation technique, but no one had ever seen a 10-star cultivation technique. There was a huge difference between a 6-star cultivation technique and a 9-star cultivation technique, but a 6-star cultivation technique was still a height that ordinary origin ability users could not even hope to reach. Ding Ming didn't dare to be careless. He could only carefully observe and construct. Once the outside world found out that his cultivation technique was a 6-star cultivation technique, who knew what kind of uproar it would cause? He had asked Little Rascal before, what was the star level of the Diamond Star technique? Unfortunately, Little Rascal couldn't answer because it didn't have enough authority. Ding Ming was too lazy to ask. Even if he did, he wouldn't get any answers. He might as well focus on his cultivation. But at this moment, he was once again awakened. He could clearly see with his telekinesis that Old Yu was holding a toolbox and banging something on the ground next to the wooden hut. Soon, he saw that Old Yu was constructing a simple wooden hut. The roof was covered by a tent, and the walls were naturally made of wooden planks and straw mats. Seeing Old Yu's happy expression, Ding Ming guessed that he had encountered something good. Old Yu, you're early. Ding Ming still walked out of the hut. Sure enough, Old Yu's face was full of smiles. Hey, little Ding, let me tell you a piece of good news. From today onwards, we'll have another neighbor. Oh. Ding Ming was a bit surprised, but he didn't ask because he could already feel 2 weak origin ability fluctuations coming from the direction of the courtyard. Turning his head around, he saw Fred, who was wearing a 5-pointed hat and a protector's uniform, leisurely walking towards him. In his hands was the same broken PDA that couldn't be any more broken. Fred didn't come alone. Following behind him was a girl with ragged clothes and an unkempt face. This girl looked to be about the same age as Ding Ming, probably around 20 years old. If it wasn't for the fact that she had some female physical characteristics, Ding Ming wouldn't have been able to tell that she was a girl. This was because she was really too skinny. Not only was she skinny, but her skin was also very dark. It wasn't the dark skin of a black person, but rather a malnourished illness. Those with experience will be able to tell at a glance that this girl must have suffered a lot to become like this. Perhaps she had escaped from a place similar to Heijin Base. Moreover, the girl's face was also very dirty. The cheeks near her lips seemed to have been burned by something, and there was a purple mark. But the most important thing was that the girl's body emitted a trace of chill. She was actually an ice element origin ability user. Looking at her energy fluctuations, it seemed that she was even stronger than Fred. Old Yu, old brother Ding, this time, I've brought you a new neighbor. Fred had already begun his introduction. She was also rescued by the Empire's patrol fleet while they were on an interstellar patrol. From now on, she will live here. I saw that there were a few empty plots of land nearby, so I'll have to trouble you to take care of her. My duty is to bring her here. Right? Introduce yourself. What's your name? The girl was very vigilant. Her eyes were filled with a thick sense of vigilance. Don't be nervous. Don't be afraid. Fred gently patted her head. This is our Norse Empire's planet, not outer space. No one can harm you, understand? Only then did the girl timidly lower her head and spit out 2 words from her mouth. Xiao Qiu. Fred frowned and said, "This child. Tell them, what's your surname and name?" Xiao Qiu. The girl's head was still very low. Old Yu laughed and said, forget it. Officer Fred, you're scaring them." Xiao Qiu. Don't you have a surname? The girl's expression was still the same. Xiao Qiu. They all call me Xiao Qiu. Old Yu was helpless. Ding Meng, who was beside him, felt a burst of sadness. This was because he had thought of Xiao Qiu. The first time he had met Xiao Qiu, the situation had been similar. Xiao Qiu couldn't remember his own name at all. This Xiao Qiu was the same. Could it be that this Xiao Qiu had also been a laborer? Chapter 99. Xiao Qiu naturally lived in Old Yu's newly built wooden shed. The conditions were even worse than Ding Meng's cabin. However, Old Yu was still very friendly to his neighbors. He warmly invited Xiao Qiu to his small courtyard and have dinner together. Unfortunately, Xiao Qiu did not appreciate his kindness and bluntly refused. However, she did not refuse the 3 nutrient fluids that Ding Meng handed to her. These were things that interstellar refugees could not refuse. It was not that Ding Meng was being kind. Recently, the weather on planet TT-12 had gradually become colder. As an ordinary person, Old Yu had a hard time working in the fields. Since this Xiao Qiu was a newcomer and an ice-type origin ability user, it would be good if she could help. Ding Meng's idea was not wrong. From the next day onward, Xiao Qiu carried a shovel and a sickle and followed the smiling Old Yu to the fields across the river. Of course, this was what Ding Meng saw with his telekinesis vision from the cabin. He was currently in a critical period of cultivation and could not pay extra attention to the outside world. The 6th origin was estimated to be completed within 10 days. As long as he was not interrupted midway, there would be no problems. That being said, it was impossible for him to be as focused as he was on the barren dome star. From his 2nd day onward, he had been scanning his surroundings while he was cultivating. Maintaining vigilance had been a habit of his for many years, even if he was in a safe environment. The ones who saw the most with his telekinesis vision were naturally Old Yu and Xiao Qiu. At first, Old Yu took Xiao Qiu to work in the fields. Gradually, Old Yu's physical strength could not keep up, and he stayed at home alone to rest. Xiao Qiu's thin and lonely figure was busy working by the river. After a busy day, she was probably tired and went back to the cabin to sleep. This kind of boring rural life was so monotonous. However, this situation completely changed on the 7th night. Ding Meng suddenly realized that Xiao Qiu did not fall asleep that night. Instead, she sat cross-legged on the straw mat with her eyes closed, as if she had entered a meditative state. She did not sleep for almost the entire night. In the morning, she carried her toolbox out again. "Something's not right, Ding Meng." Little Rascal finally spoke. Ding Meng's eyes flashed. He also felt it. This Xiao Qiu seemed to be different from ordinary origin ability users. He could not pinpoint exactly what the difference was, but he already had a bad premonition. After all, this Xiao Qiu was an origin ability user. Including himself, there were 2 origin ability users in this place. With 2 origin ability users in this remote countryside of a border planet, this place would probably not be peaceful for long. It was not until late at night on the 10th day that Ding Meng was finally alarmed. This was because he once again sensed the origin ability fluctuations from next door. This was the ice origin ability energy coming from Xiao Qiu's body. This origin ability energy was still very weak for Ding Meng, but compared to Xiao Qiu's meditation on the 7th night, this origin ability energy fluctuation was clearly much stronger. Little Rascal was also surprised. No way. Could it be that this girl doesn't need the induction cabin to cultivate? Ding Meng's expression was very serious. Little Rascal, apart from the K-virus, is there any other way to cultivate without the induction cabin? There is. Little Rascal replied with certainty. There are all sorts of strange things in this world. Some people are exceptionally talented, and their physiques are different from ordinary people from the moment they are born. They can directly come into contact with origin ability energy, and some can even accurately pinpoint the origin. However, This kind of person is 1 in 10,000. In fact, there might not even be one out of hundreds of millions of people. As far as I know, Ding Meng is the only one. Of course, I can't rule out the possibility of some secret technique manuals being able to do this, but those are not things that I know of. Ding Meng said, "But do you think Xiao Qiu is one of them?" Little Rascal said, "I can't tell at the moment, but she really is a bit strange." Not only was she strange, but if it weren't for the fact that Ding Meng was busy trying to break through the 6th origin point, he would have left the house long ago. Xiao Qiu's origin ability energy fluctuations grew stronger each time, and the chill from her ice-type origin ability could even pass through 2 walls. Disregarding everything else, even the straw mats on the door were covered in a layer of white frost. If it weren't for Ding Meng's heat source energy blocking these fluctuations, Old Yu would have wrapped himself in 4 or 5 old cotton-padded jackets and wrapped himself in his blanket to keep out the cold. Ding Meng made this decision. It was time to talk to this new neighbor. In reality, this new neighbor was also a weirdo. She had been in the countryside for about half a month, and she basically hadn't spoken much. She had a frail and quiet appearance. During the day, she would desperately work on the farm with her tools, and at night, she would hole up in the wooden shed and meditate. She didn't care about the outside world at all. She was no different from a real farmer. Cha-cha-cha. This wasn't the sound of knocking on the door, because the wooden shed didn't have a door, only a straw mat hanging from it. Ding Meng patted the straw mat as if he was knocking on the door. Xiao Qiu didn't respond from inside, so Ding Meng simply lifted the mat and walked straight in. What welcomed him was an incomparably cold energy, like a vortex that spun towards his head. If this had happened a month ago, Ding Meng would have been swept away along with him, but the current Ding Meng wasn't the same as before. When Xiao Qiu struck out with her palm, Ding Meng retreated 5 or 6 meters with a whoosh. He didn't want to take the attack head-on as a sign of friendliness. Almost at the same time, the icy vortex disappeared without a trace. It was clear that Xiao Qiu's origin ability wasn't low, but she vaguely meant that she didn't want to disturb Old Yu, who was sleeping soundly next door. Ding Meng was very satisfied with this, so he simply walked in slowly and sat down on the straw stool. There was no light in the room, and without a light, there was naturally no light, but Xiao Qiu had already gotten out of bed and stood in the middle of the room, staring fiercely at Ding Meng, her eyes full of vigilance. "Don't be nervous." Ding Meng waved his hand at her. "You and I don't have to hide anything from each other. I'm just curious. Did you stay in the refugee camp of Planet Thorn in the Linda System's Top 45 zone?" Xiao Qiu's eyes finally showed a hint of surprise. "How did you know?" Ding Meng didn't answer her question, but asked back, "Which exile planet were you sent to in the Federation?" Xiao Qiu was silent for a long time before answering. "The K6 system, the Caterdan Star Group, the Olympiad Central Camp." Ding Meng was also silent, but he didn't ask how Xiao Qiu had awakened her origin energy, nor did he ask how Xiao Qiu had escaped. These questions were the privacy of privacy for people like them, and they wouldn't answer even if you asked. "You've become a citizen of a Norse empire?" Xiao Qiu noticed the rainbow symbol on Ding Meng's shirt. Ding Meng shook his head. "I'm just a student of the academy, not a citizen. How can I become a citizen of the empire?" Xiao Qiu continued to ask. Ding Meng didn't answer. He just stared at her hands, lost in thought. Xiao Qiu instinctively hid her hands behind her back and became alert again. "What are you doing?" Ding Meng's tone turned cold. "There's nothing nice about your hands anymore." Xiao Qiu's expression also changed. She also felt an extremely sharp aura coming from outside, coming from the direction of Old Yu's courtyard. At this moment, the two of them almost simultaneously dashed out of the wooden shed and dashed toward the courtyard. Chapter 100. The lights in Old Yu's 2-story house were still on, but under the dim yellow light, there was an unfamiliar figure. A man in a black windbreaker and a black mask was standing in the middle of the yard, looking at the stacks of wheat and farming tools in the yard with great interest. The aura was coming from him. It was only when Ding Meng and Xiao Qiu arrived that he turned his head and said, "You guys reacted too slowly." He seemed to know what Ding Ming and Xiao Qiu wanted to ask, so he took the initiative to say, "Don't worry, I just put the old man in the house to sleep temporarily. He can't hear our conversation, but whether or not he can wake up depends on whether or not you guys are willing to cooperate." Ding Ming took a deep breath and forced himself to calm down. When he was talking to Xiao Qiu just now, he had turned off his telekinetic vision. In such a short time, the man in black had appeared. No matter how he had sneaked in, it was enough to show that he was not weak. Most importantly, the man in front of him gave him a familiar feeling. This man was extremely dangerous. "What do you want to cooperate with?" Ding Ming asked calmly. The man in black looked at the two of them from head to toe. "I should say, what do you want? What can you possibly have?" Xiao Qiu obviously had similar experiences, so he asked with great experience, "What do you want this time?" The man in black suddenly laughed. His laughter sounded particularly stiff in the dark night. "I'm actually sincere." These words were hard to understand. Ding Ming could not help but ask, "Where is your sincerity?" The man in black looked at him, his eyes shining in the dark. "You should thank me. Those people were going to make trouble for you, but unfortunately, they ran into me. So, I took matters into my own hands and took care of them for you. If you don't believe me, you can go to the riverside and take a look." Ding Ming secretly activated his telekinesis vision and spread his origin energy in all directions. Soon, he saw 4 or 5 people lying on the ground in the distance. They looked like they had just been knocked down, and their breathing was very weak. This distance was about 300 meters away. Ding Ming's current effective range of telekinesis vision was only 150 meters. No wonder he couldn't detect it before. However, telekinesis vision was one thing, and his own perception was another. Logically speaking, he should have been able to detect it at this distance. Ding Ming suddenly turned around and dashed outside. He had to see what was going on no matter what. Under the rocks by the river, 4 or 5 strong young men were curled up on a clump of seaweed. Because it was dark, the original color of the blood could not be seen, but the moist and cold air was filled with the smell of blood. Ding Ming's heart sank as he walked over. He saw someone he recognized, Lei Bao. Lei Bao was lying on the grass and waving weakly at him. "Ding Ming, save me." The man in black followed him and smiled. "I didn't say anything wrong, did I? They were here to make trouble for you. This person seems to be your classmate. It seems like you don't have a good reputation in school." Ding Ming's reputation was obviously not as bad as Lei Bao's, but no matter how tyrannical Lei Bao was, he shouldn't have died in the wilderness. Lei Bao's chest was bleeding. The wound was long and bloody. Ding Ming felt that this wound was very familiar. "Ding Ming, save me." Lei Bao's voice was already very weak. "Okay, I'll save you," Ding Ming replied in a deep voice. Then, he slowly walked forward and suddenly punched Lei Bao's head. Almost at the same time, the other wounded, lying on the ground, jumped up and attacked Ding Ming with their fists and feet. A large amount of heat and cold surged in between. It was like a combination of ice and fire. This change was completely unexpected. Even Xiao Qiu was stunned. However, Ding Ming lightly retreated 10 meters away. His expression was still very calm. "Your acting is not bad, but it's a pity that your acting is not good enough. Also, you're not willing to pay the price." At this moment, Lei Bao did not appear to be injured in the slightest. Together with his companions, they quickly formed a fan formation, vaguely forming a pincer attack on Ding Ming. This was clearly a trap to lure the enemy. If the black-clothed man's silent appearance was due to Ding Ming's carelessness, then with his telekinesis vision right in front of him, were Lei Bao and the others really injured? There was no way they could fool him. However, Ding Ming's tone became cold. "Lei Bao, you're playing with fire. Ding Ming, you can run in school, but let's see how you can run in the countryside." Lei Bao's face was full of anger. "You dared to cripple Hong Mei, so I dare to cripple you. Don't think that you can run away just because you have Chu Xiaoqing's support." Ding Ming asked back, "You want revenge?" Lei Bao roared, "Do you believe that I can kill you man's old man and be fine? I'm only asking you one question. Do you believe me?" Ding Ming's expression suddenly became strange and serious. He looked at the black-clothed man whose face couldn't be seen clearly. "Is this your so-called helper?" Lei Bao said proudly. "Ding Ming, I can tell you the truth. In the underworld of Chiozei City, no one dares to not give face to Jiange. He personally came to the countryside today. This is a huge honor for you. Tell me, how do you want to die? Ding Ming's pupils suddenly contracted. He seemed to have seen an ominous calamity descending upon them. His expression was somewhat sorrowful. He turned his gaze to Lei Bao and said, I have a few questions to ask. Once you're done, I'll let you attack. I promise I won't retaliate. Lei Bao was stunned. He snorted and said, If you have something to say it quickly. Ding Ming said thoughtfully, I heard that some students in the Leaston Academy didn't listen to you. They were beaten up as soon as they left the academy. Are you relying on this Jiange? Lei Bao said angrily, So what? If you have the ability, you can also beat Jiange. Then I'll admire you. Ding Ming continued, You know that you are no match for me, but you still want to play dead. Is this Jiange's idea? Lei Bao impatiently interrupted him. What nonsense. So what if it is? So what if it isn't? Are you trying to stall for time? I'll let you stall for one night. Do you think you can escape? Ding Ming sighed. You don't know anything. Lei Bao stared at him suspiciously. What are you trying to say? Ding Ming sighed. If I were you, it's not too late to go back now. Go back to school and continue being a local tyrant. Your teacher Jiafa's favorite student after all. After passing the final exam, you'll be able to do even better. But you just had to get involved in this mess. You have no idea how deep this mess is. Lei Bao looked up to the sky and laughed. Ha ha ha. Ding Ming, I thought you had some ability. I didn't expect you to be so scared. You really disappoint me. Are you done laughing? Ding Ming stared at him coldly. If you're done laughing, then I'll have to trouble you to make a move. I'm done with my questions. As expected, Lei Bao stopped laughing. He took a step forward and fiercely threw a punch. This punch was not something that Zhu Fei and Hong Mei could compare to. His arm had a faint blue electric current flowing through it, and the air around him crackled. This was the characteristic of an electromagnetic type origin ability user. They use strong electric currents to paralyze and hurt their opponent. However, Ding Ming stood in place and did not even move. Lei Bao's punch landed on Ding Ming's nose. At least, he thought that he had hit Ding Ming's nose, but the reality was not what he thought. He suddenly felt his throat tighten, as if something was strangling him. He could not even breathe. Then, his vision became distorted, and his body involuntarily retreated. In any case, he was still an advanced origin ability user. He knew that someone was sneak attacking him from behind. He circulated his origin ability energy with all his might and used the momentum to throw a backhand punch behind him. Lei Bao's fist, which could shatter heaven and earth, was casually received by a black glove. The black glove then twisted in the opposite direction, and with a crisp crack, Lei Bao's left arm was broken on the spot. He did not even feel the pain, nor did he even have the time to cry out. All he could see was a green light flashing before his eyes. Gee, this time, blood really sprayed out like a spray. Moreover, it was his own blood. The black-clothed man released his hand, and Lei Bao's body collapsed to the ground like a pile of mud. He had pretended to be dead just now, and now he was really dead. This turn of events was simply unexpected. Even Lei Bao's four companions did not expect this to happen. They all turned around and looked at the black-clothed man in disbelief. Jiange, only Ding Ming remained calm. He said in a deep voice, He's not your Jiange. If you don't want to die, hurry up and run. This sentence was more effective than anything else. The four of them were startled, and then they jumped up like rabbits. They quickly turned around and fled. Unfortunately, they ran in the wrong direction. If someone had jumped into the river, they might have had a chance to survive. However, all four of them ran to the left. This time, even Xiao Qiu saw it clearly. A black whip that seemed to have merged with the darkness of the night drilled out of the black-clothed man's sleeve. The whip seemed to have grown eyes and instantly wrapped around the four people's necks. The black-clothed man fiercely pulled back, and the four of them completely lost the ability to resist, just like Lei Bao. The black-clothed man's figure flashed, and several green lights of the same color flashed. The four people clutched their throats and fell to the ground. A mist of blood sprayed out of their mouths, and covered the sky above the riverbank. The black-clothed man withdrew his whip and wrist blade. With his hands behind his back, he observed the corpses on the ground. He looked very satisfied. You guys are still worth something. If it weren't for you guys leading the way, I wouldn't have found this place. Ding Meng, who had been very calm all this time, was a little surprised. He was very calm about the black-clothed man's speed and cruelty. What surprised him was that the black-clothed man had used the wrist blade hidden in his sleeve to slit everyone's throats with extraordinary precision. At the same time, he did not stop there. The sharp blade started from the throat and ended at the left elbow. The wound was as precise as a scalpel. Not only was the wrist blade fatal, it also severed the tendons and veins in the relevant parts of the body. This technique was clearly Ding Meng's expertise. Xiao Qiu shouted, "This is the Norse Empire. You can't run away if you kill people so cruelly." The black-clothed man laughed sinisterly again. "You guys should worry about yourselves. If I want to leave, I can leave at any time. You guys can't stop me at all. But when the protection team and the police arrive, you won't be able to explain yourself." These words were meant for Ding Meng. Ding Meng knew very well what he was trying to do. He had used such a method to kill someone, and it was obvious that he was trying to frame her. The T-shaped claw knife had always been on her, and when the protection team came to check her wound, the first person they would suspect would be her. Ding Meng suddenly sighed. The thing he was most worried about had finally happened. The Black Gold Base's assault mercenary group had actually chased them all the way to the Norse Empire. Chapter 101. The surprise attack mercenary group was actually not that famous within the Holy Grail Federation, but they were famous on the exiled planets under the Federation's jurisdiction because of their harsh treatment of the laborers. Of course, the partners who hired them called this their professionalism. Now, the surprise attack mercenary group had become professional on planet TT-12. Obviously, those who were interested in the K-virus had never given up on investigating it. Ding Meng stared at the man in black. "You're not from the Black Gold Base, but you seem to know a lot about them." The man in black finally looked surprised. "I didn't expect you to have such a good eye, even though you're slow to react." Actually, Ding Meng didn't have a good eye. He didn't recognize the black-clothed man, but he recognized the whip in the man's sleeve. When he was in Black Gold Base, he had studied that whip countless times. If it wasn't for Little Four risking his life to save him, he would have died under that whip. He didn't expect to meet this soul-chasing whip again. It was really like a ghost that wouldn't go away. "Sadler died by my hands." Ding Meng decided to lay all his cards on the table. "I know," the man in black said proudly. "If it weren't for that, I wouldn't have chased you all the way here. Sadler is my brother." Ding Meng said, "If you want to avenge him, then please do it." The man in black said, "But I don't want your life." Ding Meng said, "What do you want?" The man in black stared at him. "You should know very well what I want." Ding Meng said in a low voice, "Are you threatening me?" The man in black said in a low voice, "If I say that I'll spare your life and ask you to give me the thing, this method is undoubtedly stupid. I said that I came with sincerity. You can ask for anything you want. Money, resources, cultivation methods, weapons, citizenship. I can give you all of these. You should know that the thing in your hand is not something that someone like you should have." Ding Meng said, "Then what kind of person should have it? Is it you?" The man in black said, "I don't deserve it either. But no matter what kind of person it is, it's not someone like you." Ding Meng's tone turned cold. "What kind of person am I? Low-class people? Inferior people? Or do you think they're interstellar refugees?" The black-clothed man's tone also turned cold. "Aren't you?" Ding Meng sneered. "From the beginning to the end, you've never treated anyone as a human being." The black-clothed man said proudly, "Lowly people are always like this. People without value usually have a tragic ending. You still have value, and now you have a chance. Why don't you seize it?" Ding Meng sneered even more. "What others give you is not a chance." The black-clothed man's eyes flashed coldly. "It seems like you don't know how to cherish things." Ding Meng said, "That's better than those who seek their own deaths." Xiao Qiu could already tell that these two people had a deep grudge against each other. It was inevitable that they would come to blows. The night was already too dark, and the black-clothed man's speed was also very fast. Like a ghost, he swept in front of Ding Meng. He didn't use his fist, but the wrist blade under his sleeve. It was a sharp blade with a faint green luster. Every time the blade was swung, it would have a strange arc. However, Ding Meng was able to dodge it at the right time. "Kid, you've improved." The black-clothed man had a strange look on his face. He had watched the battle videos of the Corps many times. He had studied Ding Meng's strength, speed, characteristics, and habits in detail. He had come to planet TT-12 because he was sure that Ding Meng was no match for him. But now, it seemed that he would not be able to deal with him without showing a few moves. However, before he could do so, he felt a chill from behind. It was like the cold wind in the middle of the night, causing him to shiver. Although Xiao Qiu did not have much interaction with Ding Meng, she could still judge from the current situation that Ding Meng was hiding some secret that could not be exposed. The black-clothed man was obviously here for this secret. If the black-clothed man killed Ding Meng, he would not let her go either. She had seen many cases of silencing people. Therefore, she jumped up at the right time and launched a sneak attack from behind. She did not expect this attack to hurt the opponent. The effect of 2 against 1 was to distract the opponent. However, she had still underestimated her opponent's strength. The cold air current from her ice annihilation palm hadn't even arrived, and instead, the opponent's heel had arrived first. The black-clothed man flipped in the air and used his heel to repel the ice palm. When he flipped over, he used his left foot to forcefully smash Ding Meng's head. Ding Meng increased his speed and charged forward. His shoulder exploded with a bang, sending the black-clothed man flying. Little rascal immediately calculated the result. He's already reached the level of an origin energy warrior. You won't be able to hurt him like this. Indeed, the black-clothed man spun a few times in the air before landing firmly on the ground. A trace of a smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Not bad. Interesting. However, an instant later, his expression changed because he felt an even stronger wave of ice origin energy gather behind him. This wave of origin energy was at least several times stronger than before. It turned out that after he had sent Xiao Qiu flying with his kick, Xiao Qiu did not fall to the ground. Instead, she knelt on one knee and focused her origin energy on her right hand. Her right hand became completely blue, as if she had become a translucent ice sculpture. The black-clothed man cursed inwardly. He could already tell that this black-clothed girl's ice annihilation palm was at least at the fusion realm. At this realm, she could injure someone from a distance. Back at Black Gold Base, Ding Meng had been severely injured by Julie just like this. Xiao Qiu suddenly slammed his palm on the ground, and the force of his palm turned into a blue energy that traveled along the riverbank. The sand, stones, and water plants along the way exploded one after another. And when it reached the feet of the black-clothed man, there was a series of kacha, kacha, kacha sounds, and the energy spread from his boots to his head in an instant. Xiao Qiu was also shocked. Under normal circumstances, this palm strike of hers could turn a living person into an ice sculpture. But the black-clothed man's entire body was only covered in a thin layer of blue ice. He was completely unharmed. However, Ding Meng would not let this opportunity go to waste. He had already leaped into the air and made a karate chop. There was a loud crash as the black-clothed man shattered the layer of ice on his body. His left hand quickly lashed out with a whip. The whip accurately coiled around Ding Meng's wrist. At the same time, a powerful force was transmitted to him. His karate chop was naturally unable to cut through. Xiao Qiu gritted her teeth. This time, she slammed both of her palms into the ground. 2 waves of blue origin energy once again turned into a river and rushed towards the black-clothed man. "You're still coming?" The black-clothed man was furious, but he did not dare to take the ice annihilation palm head-on. Instead, he leaped into the air. The river of ice that was originally coming for him had crossed the riverbank and was now rushing towards Ding Meng instead. Kacha, kacha, kacha. Crack! Ding Meng's entire body was visibly covered in a layer of pure white ice that was half a meter thick. He looked like an iceman wrapped in a crystal coffin. He could not move at all. The black-clothed man in midair shook his wrist, and a string of white energy suddenly shot out from his glove. The energy chain was instantly released, and the bright electric current was like a large net that tightly bound the ball of ice. This time, Ding Ming couldn't struggle even if she wanted to. Xiao Qiu was clearly frightened. She had not only failed to steal the chicken she was trying to steal, but she had also done more harm than good. At this moment, the black-clothed man's body had already descended like a rock. The wrist blade under his sleeve glowed with a threatening green light. It was as frightening as the tongue of a poisonous snake. Clink! This was the sound of a sharp blade piercing through a layer of ice. It was soft, but exceptionally clear. The wrist blade was aimed right at Ding Ming's heart. The black-clothed man was clearly well-versed in the art of killing. He knew exactly how to kill with a single blow. Xiao Qiu's heart suddenly sank. She had already seen streaks of bright red appear in the pure white ice. They were slowly spreading, like a small plum blossom blooming in the snow. Ding Ming had obviously been stabbed by the wrist blade. Blood was already seeping out. If Ding Ming died, she would not be able to escape. Based on the previous exchange, she knew very well that the black-clothed man's strength was definitely not inferior to hers. But at this moment, an incredible scene occurred. The originally pure white layer of ice seemed to have changed color. It turned from white to yellow, and then from yellow to gold. It no longer looked like a block of ice. It was like a ball of incomparably brilliant gold. Its brilliant light illuminated the entire riverbank. The black-clothed man was also shocked. He suddenly discovered that Ding Ming, who was inside the layer of ice, seemed to have produced an extremely strong resistance. No matter how much magic he used, the wrist blade could not penetrate even an inch further. Moreover, this golden energy had also infected the energy chain. The originally bright electric current had also changed color. At the same time, it also rebounded along the whip. What the hell was this? The black-clothed man and Xiao Qiu were both bewildered. A lifelike diamond mirror image appeared out of thin air. Not only did it envelop Ding Ming, it also covered the layer of ice. This was a three-dimensional defensive force field that could only be produced after the fourth origin of the Diamond Star technique was constructed. The first three origins only formed a surface, while the fourth one formed a body. The fifth origin hadn't even been used yet. Little Rascal was rapidly calculating. He's of the light element, so his killing power isn't high enough. We can use the Diamond Star technique together with the Overlord's mountain crushing force to counterattack. Ding Ming increased his origin energy once more. His entire body trembled violently. With a thunderous boom, the diamond mirror image shattered into countless fragments like glass and shot out in all directions. This situation was like throwing a boulder into a calm lake. In the blink of an eye, a monstrous wave was set off. This wave instantly shattered the layer of ice without a trace. The weeds, stones, and sand by the riverside were all lifted into the air. Even the corpses of Lei, Bao, and the others were shaken into the river. Ding Ming's heat energy had already begun to evaporate the river's surface, creating a dense cloud of water vapor. Under such a powerful and exaggerated explosion, the black-clothed man was also sent flying. A stream of blood scattered through the air like agate, but it was quickly swept up by the sand and stones. As for Xiao Qiu in the distance, she was completely powerless to resist. All she could do was hold her head and lie on the ground, allowing the storm to engulf her. In just 7 or 8 seconds, her small and frail body was buried under the sand. Chapter 102. As the black-clothed man was sent flying, he did some calculations. His face had suffered a heavy blow, several of his ribs had been broken, his shoulder had been heavily injured, and his left arm was completely unable to exert any strength. However, these were all secondary. The key was that when the other party had unleashed the origin energy storm, the scorching hot and powerful origin energy had completely suppressed the circulation of origin energy in his body, making it difficult for him to even breathe. He felt as if he was being roasted under the scorching sun of the desert. This Ding Meng had actually become this strong in just a few short months. He simply couldn't believe it. However, now was not the time for regret. Before the black-clothed man could even land on the ground, Ding Meng's figure had already arrived like a ghost. Once again, he swung his hand blade backwards, aiming for the man's temple. This time, there was no way for him to block. The black-clothed man had no doubt that if he were to take all of this, even if he didn't die, he would still lose consciousness. He gritted his teeth and disappeared with a whoosh. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. The sound of clothes fluttering in the wind could be heard. A large number of black-clothed mirror images appeared on the riverbank, surrounding Ding Meng on the riverbank. It's afterimage again. Little Rascal reminded Ding Meng. This guy actually refined so many clones. Ding Meng stood in place and calmed down. He had also seen that the black-clothed man actually had as many as 10 clones. Compared to Little Red, not only were there twice as many clones, but the speed of these clones was also unimaginably fast. They formed a line between each other. Not only could he not see them clearly, he couldn't even see them clearly. The more he looked at them, the more his vision blurred, and he felt a sense of dizziness. Just now, the golden force field of the Diamond Astral Technique had broken through the layer of ice and exploded. Now, it had formed a demonic mass of black chaos, trapping him in the middle once more. The difference in strength between an Origin Energy Warrior and an Origin Energy Cultivator was like heaven and earth. If Little Red were here, she would probably be killed by this mass of chaos. However, Ding Meng was obviously not Little Red. The black-clothed man was also clear that just relying on the force field would not be able to do anything to him. The explosive energy that Ding Meng had just displayed had already far surpassed the standard of an ordinary Origin Energy Cultivator. Or rather, it was no longer within the scope of an Origin Energy Cultivator. This was clearly at the level of a warrior, and it even vaguely surpassed that of a beginner warrior. This time, Ding Meng naturally could not use the same method he had used on Little Red. He also knew that the black-clothed man was not an ordinary person. He would not be able to face him head-on. The Origin Energy Warrior definitely had his own trump card. What he needed to do was to wait patiently. It was still the same logic. Although Afterimage looked scary, it consumed a lot of stamina. It was not a bad idea to think of someone who moved at light speed as an assassin. No matter how shocking or dazzling you were, the only thing that could produce results was the final fatal blow. If an assassin could not kill someone, then it was useless. Sure enough, the black-clothed man's afterimage did not last long. He finally could not help but make the first move. At this moment, 10 identical mirror images surrounded him from all directions at the same time. It was as if 10 wrist blades were converging toward the center at the same time. No one could tell which was the real one and which was the fake one, nor could anyone avoid such an attack. Ding Meng did not dodge. He still stood where he was, but the fifth origin in his body had already begun to operate. The exquisite diamond mirror image appeared again and enveloped him. Ding, 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 ding. There was a series of rapid sounds. These sounds were like pearls and jade falling onto a plate. They were extremely dense. However, all the wrist blades were repelled as soon as they collided with the diamond mirror. The mirror images that were repelled slowly blurred, faded, and finally disappeared. However, as soon as they disappeared, there was another series of swish, swish, swish sounds. This time, the 12 mirror images appeared again and continued to attack. The diamond mirror image suddenly spun rapidly. This time, the wrist blades did not even need to be repelled. Before they could even touch the mirror, they were forced back, blurred, and disappeared by the powerful force field. The black-clothed man was probably going all out. He pushed the new round of afterimage to the limit and actually created 16 mirror images. 4 of the fake ones even descended from the sky. His intention was obvious. He wanted to find a flaw or gap in the Diamond Star technique. Unfortunately, he did not have the opportunity to do so. The diamond mirror image spun even faster, like a golden spinning top on the riverbank. There was no flaw to speak of. These fake bodies could not even get close to the real body before they were catalyzed and disappeared. Ding Ming suddenly said, "You're wasting your energy like this. Don't you think you're very childish?" This was another risky move. This was also his usual strategy in battle. He gambled on the fact that his opponent would be impatient after failing to take him down. He would definitely fly into a rage after hearing this. A laborer actually dares to boast like this. The black-clothed man was indeed furious. "I'm an Origin Force warrior of the Surprise Attack mercenary group. How can I not defeat a lowly laborer like you? Where will I put my face when I return?" At this moment, his figure appeared right above Ding Ming's head. His wrist blade and his body almost merged into one. He descended like a bolt of lightning. This was already his maximum speed. This strike would kill either Ding Ming or Ding Ming. He didn't believe that Ding Ming could dodge it, let alone block it. His choice of location was undoubtedly the most correct, because the diamond mirror image was a triangular object. No matter how it spun, the top was always a single point. If he charged in from there, it was indeed possible that he could cut Ding Ming's head in two. However, he should not have responded to Ding Ming's taunt. As soon as he spoke, Ding Ming locked onto his position. When his sharp blade came down, Ding Ming suddenly raised his head and looked directly at him. The two men's faces were less than a meter apart. They could even see each other's expressions clearly. Ding Ming's expression was still calm, but the black-clothed man's pupils contracted. It was as if there was an invisible barrier between him and Ding Ming. His wrist blades were almost hanging on the tip of Ding Ming's forehead, unable to go even half an inch further. This was obviously not caused by the diamond barrier, just now, because he could not feel his opponent's heat origin energy. However, this barrier was still there. He could not stab down, nor could he retreat. His whole body seemed to be imprisoned by an invisible force. At this moment, a dark golden light rose in front of his eyes. Then he felt as if a scalding venomous snake had drilled into his wrist. He could not feel any pain, but he could feel that this venomous snake had drained the strength from his entire arm. Before he could react, he felt the world around him spin, and he fell to the ground. It was only then that he saw the dark golden blade hidden between Ding Ming's fingers. He had also repeatedly studied his opponent's T-shaped claws, and he had always been on guard against this most hidden killing move of his opponent. However, this blade would always strike at the most unexpected moment, from the most difficult position to defend against, and strike at the most vital part of his body. Ka-ka-ka, tch, ka-ka-ka, the sound was very stiff. It was the sound of the blade cutting through bones. The claw blade started from his wrist. Along the way it cut through his hand tendons, cut open his tendons, and shattered his shoulder blade. Finally, it cleanly cut open his throat, revealing his esophagus and trachea. How Sadler died, he died in the same way. The blade was instantly dyed red by the enemy's blood. Ding Ming stared at the corpse on the ground. The black-clothed man's eyes bulged out, and his expression was one of shock and fear. Before he died, he seemed to ask, "Aren't you a low-level laborer? How did you become so powerful?" Ding Ming stared at him silently. His calm expression seemed to be answering him. Even low-level people like us, whom you look down on, can still take the lives of high-class people like you. There was another PU sound. Ding Ming flipped his hand again, and the black-clothed man's head was cut off. This was not because he was ruthless. After all, Origin Energy Warriors were not ordinary people. In order to prevent more complications, the best way was to cut off the other party's head and throw it into the river. If nothing unexpected happened, you could forget about resurrecting. It was not until the black-clothed man was completely killed that Ding Ming's body relaxed. Only then did he feel a wave of tiredness. Why had the black-clothed man's blade not been able to stab down from the sky just now? That was because he had used his telekinesis to control the other party. This consumption was undoubtedly enormous. No wonder little rascal had warned him before that not only did he need to cultivate properly, he also needed to use it carefully. The night was still sinister. After an unknown amount of time, Ding Ming finally turned around. He opened his telekinesis vision again and swept his gaze around. He walked in front of a mound of dirt and reached out to pull out Xiao Qiu, who was buried underneath. Xiao Qiu was still in shock, but when she saw the headless corpse on the ground, she couldn't help but vomit. "Have you vomited enough?" Ding Ming looked at her. Xiao Qiu gasped for breath and said, "You killed that guy?" There was obvious disbelief in her voice. Ding Ming said indifferently, "If you vomited enough, then bury what you vomited. Bury these corpses too." Xiao Qiu immediately understood what he meant. He was trying his best not to leave any traces. Whether it was the black-clothed man or Lei Bao, these corpses would be found sooner or later. What happened here would be exposed sooner or later. When that happened, trouble would follow. No matter what kind of trouble it was, their peaceful days here were over. Thinking of this, Xiao Qiu couldn't help but admire Ding Ming. Ding Ming was obviously someone who had experienced life and death. He had learned to be cautious and meticulous from all kinds of lessons. Ding Ming suddenly turned on the wristwatch on his wrist. This wristwatch was exclusive to the List Academy. The signal coverage was limited to the Autumn Lake area, so the effect was not as good as the TT-12 Star Universal wristwatch. Seeing that the signal was not connected, Xiao Qiu asked worriedly, "You're not calling the police, are you?" Ding Ming said, "I hope the police will come later." During the time he had spent on TT-12 Star, he had learned a lot of common sense. If Lei Bao was lost for more than 3 days, someone would definitely ask about it. At that time, the Public Security Department and the Civil Protection Team would be alerted. If they couldn't find him, they would contact the International Space Station and use satellites to accurately locate the wristwatch. By the time they picked up the corpses and suspected him, it would take no more than 5 days. At this time, the signal was connected and the hologram popped up. Chu Xiaoqing's beautiful face appeared on the screen. She looked surprised. "Ding Ming, I'm glad you contacted me. Where are you? Why is it so dark?" Ding Ming was too lazy to talk nonsense and went straight to the point. "Miss Chu, I've decided. I'm willing to participate in your mission. When will the mission start?" "Great." Chu Xiaoqing smiled. "I was just about to contact you. I'll be leaving in a few days. Since you decided to come, let's meet in Verntarn Town." Ding Ming didn't ask any more questions. He nodded and turned off the wristwatch. Chapter 103. The lights were still dim, but the night sky suddenly began to drizzle. Old Yu's house was shrouded in the cold wind and rain. Old Yu lay quietly on the bed in the room, as if he had fallen asleep. His wrinkled face looked like a piece of bark that had been gnawed by wind and rain for many years under the light. Ding Ming silently stared at his face, lost in thought. Old Yu wasn't really asleep. In Ding Ming's field of vision, Old Yu's neck and temple each had an inconspicuous bruise. Clearly, he had been knocked unconscious by the black-clothed man. Fortunately, he wasn't seriously injured. However, he was an old man with 1 foot in the grave. He had experienced too much in his life and couldn't withstand any more torment. It was already fortunate that he was able to keep his life. The only thing Ding Ming felt at this moment was gratitude. Ever since he came to planet TT-12, Old Yu was the only person who didn't care about his identity and helped him selflessly. Ding Ming could never forget those who helped him without asking for anything in return. Xiao Si, Old Yu Man, Miss Chu, Teacher Zhao, and many, many more people. Ding Ming suddenly felt that he was actually very lucky. Only now did he truly realize that it was easy for a person to die, but difficult to live on. Moreover, relying on oneself alone wasn't enough. The purpose of living wasn't necessarily to do those so-called meaningful things, but he would definitely do his best to repay those who helped him. Thinking of this, Ding Ming moved the box of Deca nutrient solution that had a capacity of 3,000 plus to his bedside. He hadn't used up too much of it during this period of cultivation. With his current physical fitness and origin energy strength, his desire for nutrient solutions wasn't as urgent as it was on Planet Dome. There were about 120 vials of nutrient solution left in the box, enough for Old Yu to use for a long time. After doing all this, Ding Ming got up and walked out the door. Xiao Qiu couldn't help but ask, "Where are you going?" Ding Ming didn't even turn his head. "Take care of Old Yu." Xiao Qiu realized that he was preparing to leave. "Ding Ming, can I go with you?" Ding Ming stopped. "Oh." Xiao Qiu was a little timid. I have nowhere to go. If I stay, I'm afraid I'll implicate old you. Ding Ming sighed inwardly. He had decided to leave because he was afraid that he would implicate old you. Although Xiao Qiu was not easy to get along with, he was not a bad person. He was also aware of the stakes involved. Little Rascal suddenly said, Ding Ming, you can actually take her with you. She's quite powerful, so she won't be a burden to you. Also, you can ask her what kind of cultivation method she's using in the future. It might be beneficial to you. Ding Ming nodded. What Little Rascal said made sense, but more than that, it was because he had a special feeling for workers. Xiao Qiu's situation was probably similar to Xiao Xi's, so he could not bring himself to reject Little Rascal. He could be said to be merciless to his enemies, but he could not harden his heart to the people around him. He could only nod. Then let's go together. The two of them walked out of the courtyard. Ding Ming looked longingly at the small wooden hut beside him. Although this wooden hut was converted from a cow pen, it was still personally built by old you. Xiao Qiu's wooden hut was the same. Although the wooden hut was simple and even a little ugly, Ding Ming once felt warmth and care from it. It was condensed from the blood, sweat, and tears of others. It was no longer as simple as a wooden hut. It was a trace of Ding Ming's memories and thoughts. Old you, if I'm still alive in the future, I'll definitely come back to see you, Ding Ming silently said in his heart. Another round of night rain came. The lights in the courtyard suddenly blurred again. Ding Ming and Little Rascal's figures disappeared into the depths of the cold rain. On the other side of the curtain of rain, a faint dot of light streaked across the sky. It passed through the pouring rain and slowly floated up along the river. Not long after, the dot of light suddenly grew bigger and turned into a ball of light. It was a small transport ship called Mystic Bird, but there was no sign on the hull of the ship. Mystic Bird's undercarriage was already open, and it slowly landed in the middle of the field. After the hatch opened, a group of fully armed soldiers jumped out with all kinds of guns. These guns had a common characteristic, and that was that when the left side of the gun was pulled open, what was revealed was not the barrel but a small blue screen. On the screen was a simple scan. This was clearly a mini version of a detection device. The leader of the team was wearing a pair of black goggles. He directed a group of people to search the field. Unfortunately, they could not find anything because a soldier had already come up to report. Sir, other than that house, there are no signs of human life in the vicinity. The leader was clearly thinking, is there an error in the coordinates? The soldier shook his head. There is no error. We carried out a precise landing according to the signal provided by Commander Salazar. The leader decisively turned on his wristwatch and raised the screen. The image of a handsome officer in uniform appeared on the screen. This person was none other than Jiahua. The Sea Heaven's Pole Island starship did not dare to enter the Empire's star sector. It was still in space. The starship only sent out ordinary civilian cargo ships with the Empire's logo on the outside. They then used the cargo ships to load the Mystic Bird transport ships and used the method of layer by layer to avoid the detection of the space station and sneak into planet TT-12. They only dared to do this on peripheral planets. If it was really the central planet of the Empire's core star sector, Jiahua would not dare to come even if he had 10,000 guts. The instantaneous communication between the planet and the starship in space also relied on quantum transmission. This was actually very risky because it would alert the space station if it took too long. Jiahua naturally attached great importance to the leader turning on quantum communication. He even frowned. Can't find anyone. Yes. The leader replied affirmatively. Jiahua was silent for a long time before he gave the order in a dignified tone. Turn on the ion scanner and control the range to 1 kilometer. Search the area and see if you can find the body. His words did not have any special meaning. They were similar to normal orders, but the leader's heart was in turmoil. What did he mean by looking for the body? It was definitely not looking for Ding Ming's body, but Commander Salazar's body. Commander Salazar was the man in black from before. He was a light-speed Origin Energy warrior. If all the Origin Energy warriors were killed by the target, then this group of Origin Energy warriors was undoubtedly here to deliver food. Although he was surprised, the order still had to be carried out. The 5 bodies were placed at the leader's feet in less than 10 minutes. The most conspicuous of them was the headless body, but the leader still recognized who it was. The night rain was heavy, and the blood of the body had long flowed out. It mixed with a large amount of mud and weeds, and the body looked dirty and messy. One could imagine how tragic Commander Salazar's death must have been. The leader's whole body was cold, but he still had to do what he had to do. After a simple examination of the body's wounds, he had to turn on his wrist device again to report. It is confirmed that Commander Salazar's time of death was 1 hour and 22 minutes ago. Jiahua, who was on the starship, obviously saw the clear image. His face did not look good. This result was beyond their expectations. According to the original plan, Salazar had landed on planet TT-12 3 days ago and sent a signal after arriving at Dingmeng's specific coordinates. The Sea Heavens Pole Island also sent people to pick him up. After subduing Dingmeng, he immediately returned on the Mystic Bird and finally met up with Jiahua. The mission was completed. However, no one expected things to turn out like this. It seemed that Salazar did not subdue Dingmeng. Instead, he was subdued by Dingmeng, and in such a miserable way. It was enough to show that this Dingmeng's methods were cruel. He did not leave any chance of survival. "Did you find the head?" Jiahua finally spoke. The leader could only shake his head. "No, it was probably taken away by the target." Jiahua immediately refuted him. It is impossible for him to carry a head around and arouse suspicion. It is very likely that he threw the head into the river and washed it away. The leader immediately said, "The target does not have any means of transportation. He should not have run far. If we act now, we can definitely catch up with him." Jiahua shook his head. "Verdantarn town is in front of you. If you go any further, you will alarm the locals. We are taking a risk. At this stage, we cannot make any more noise. Besides, if he can kill Salazar, he can definitely kill you. If we catch up with him, we will just die in vain." The leader seemed unwilling. "There is still a living person in the house over there. He is the target's refugee lodging family. The head of the household is surnamed you. Should we bring the head of the household back? He may know some clues." Jiahua was silent for a long time before he waved his hand. "No, not bring him back." The leader did not seem to understand. Jiahua muttered, "If the head of the household knew something about the target, he should not continue to stay in the house at this time. Instead, he should have escaped with the target or been taken away by the target. The head of the household obviously does not know." This analysis was undoubtedly very reasonable. This was also Ding Meng's intention. Oldu would only be safe if he left here. If he really stayed, it would cause endless trouble. The leader bowed his head and said, "Sir, what should we do next? Please give us instructions." Jiahua said lightly, "The operation is over. Return to the Sea-Sky Pole Island immediately." The leader did not have time to be surprised before the communication was cut off. Of course, he would not see the situation on the starship at this moment. Jiahua's face turned green after he hung up. Fayers looked at him with a malicious smile. This operation plan was planned by Jiahua, but Fayers did not agree. For a captain with rich sailing experience, this kind of plan was completely without knowing the depth of the enemy's strength. To put it bluntly, it was risking his life. This was completely different from Chu Yifeng's style of having in the bag. But now that things had turned out like this, Fels could not laugh at him. He could only sigh. Let Master Feng make the decision. Jiahua could not help but ask, "What does Master Feng mean now?" Fels looked at him. "Master Feng has already given Miss Bing full authority to deal with this Ding Meng. Just wait for Miss Bing to give the order. We just need to cooperate." "What plan does Miss Bing have?" Jiahua was still not satisfied. If this kind of low-level operation could fail, no one would be satisfied. Fayers shrugged his shoulders. "That's not something I can know. Just follow orders. That is the only way," Jiahua said bitterly. In his subconscious, although Miss Bing was not weak, she might not be stronger than him in terms of planning, judging, and commanding on the spot. After all, she was a woman. Some flaws and weaknesses were innate, but men did not have these problems. But when he thought of Miss Bing's beautiful face Jiahua's gaze became a little dazed. Chapter 104. It was still a field, and the golden waves of wheat looked even more charming under the drizzle. The sky was already bright, and a Kitty Hawk military transport ship was anchored in the field. This was the suburb of Verdantarn town. It was reasonable to say that all land transport ships should enter the port, but when he saw the Empire logo and the unique military logo on the hull of the ship, Ding Meng was relieved. Chu Xiaoqing stood by the cabin door, and behind her was always the unassuming, polite, and smiling Sister Zhong. If a transport ship was anchored here, just by looking at Chu Xiaoqing's youthful and fashionable dress, people who did not know would definitely think that this was a beauty waiting for her boyfriend to go on a trip together. However, Ding Meng really did not have any characteristics of a boyfriend. After a night of walking, his whole body was already wet. His clothes were originally tattered, but fortunately, the night of heavy rain had already washed away the blood on his body. Xiaoqiu was not bad. Needless to say, her clothes were tattered, but after being washed by the rain, her face was a lot cleaner. Except for the purple scar mark, Xiaoqiu's appearance was at least not ugly. Ding Meng, I've been waiting for you for a long time. Chu Xiaoqing greeted him. When she came up, Sister Zhong's wristwatch was already turned on. She glanced at Xiaoqiu slightly and carefully looked at Xiaoqiu's identity record before nodding at Chu Xiaoqing. How could their connection be hidden from Ding Meng's eyes? He simply took the initiative to explain. Xiaoqiu is also an interstellar refugee. She's my neighbor and has nowhere to go. She won't drag me down. This was the excuse he had thought of on the way here. After all, there was an extra person for no reason, and it was different for what they had originally discussed. If Chu Xiaoqing only needed him to participate, then he could only contact Yuman and think of a way to get Xiaoqiu to go to Leaston Academy. Unexpectedly, Chu Xiaoqing smiled generously and said, Ding Meng, don't worry. I don't know the specifics of the mission, and it's not up to me to decide how many people are needed. Let's get on the ship first. Ding Meng was a little surprised. Where are we going now? Chu Xiaoqing's answer surprised him even more. The International Space Station of TT-12. The space station was a space station. It was a spacecraft that operated in the near-Earth orbit of the planet for a long time. However, in this era, the space station had long left the category of spacecraft. Take the space station of planet TT-12 as an example. It was a huge fortress formed by 3 general-purpose starships operating in the outer orbit of planet TT-12. At the same time, it continuously and seamlessly docked with various large spacecraft, cruise fleets, space workstations, and motherships of the same level. Strictly speaking, the space station had completely become a small satellite of the planet. At the same time, it was also the planet's largest port. Any large fleet or ship passing through this star field had to enter the port for inspection. Only after obtaining authorization could they sail or land on the planet. In theory, the space station was not equipped with offensive weapons, but had very comprehensive detection, protection, long-range, transmission, positioning, and other systems. Its main purpose was naturally to protect the star field and the main planet. The International Space Station allowed ships from different countries to dock, as long as it was legal, followed the relevant regulations, and had a pass. Even the ships of the Frogman Kingdom and the Devourer World could dock at the port. This way, the International Space Station could be gathered at any time by an unfathomable force. Chu Yifeng's Sea Heaven's Pole Island was powerful enough. In his eyes, the space station was a large target in space. However, if this space station happened to be docked with a fleet of the Norse Empire, then Chu Yifeng could only obediently run with his tail between his legs. If the fleets of the Empire, the Frogman Kingdom, and the Devourer World were playing here, and he wanted to provoke them, he would be courting death. The International Space Station of planet TT-12 was extremely large. From afar, it looked like a great wall of steel in space. The overall shape was like 2 H letters stacked together. All kinds of ships, large and small, were constantly coming in and out. Among them, There was no lack of large starships of the Empire docked at the giant launch pad of the space station. It was an extremely spectacular and shocking sight. Nebula TCP-121 was at the edge of the Norse Empire, and planet TT-12 was the border. Therefore, large patrolling fleets of the Empire were often docked here. On the other hand, the backward border planets had stronger security. The Kitty Hawk transport ship that Ding Meng and the others were on was like a mosquito flying into a pile of steel in this magnificent space station. If not for the advanced quantum radar scanning, the transport ship would not be visible to the naked eye. After entering the port for a routine inspection, the transport ship was allowed to enter entrance 38. The interior of the space station was not like the starships, which had metal passages and command halls everywhere. It was completely like an office area on land. The blue sky, white clouds, green water, and green mountains were projected through the crystal glass to make the staff, who had lived in space for a long time, feel less monotonous and boring. As soon as Chu Xiaoqing got off the ship, a staff in uniform came forward to greet her. She took a small shuttle car from the station to the designated area of the space station. As for the specific location, Ding Meng could not remember and was too lazy to remember. Anyway, the shuttle car made several turns and drove for more than 10 minutes before entering a building that looked like the advanced training center of the Leaston Academy. The building had a total of 12 floors. Ding Meng and her group were brought directly to the top floor. The top floor seemed to be a simple meeting room. Looking through the window of the meeting room, it was actually the main entrance of the Leaston Academy. The Baroque-style church building was surrounded by a cluster of golden ginkgo trees, reflecting the clear blue sky above. A romantic and beautiful feeling spontaneously arose spontaneously. This was obviously the effect of the crystal glass. Only then did Ding Meng realize that there were still people sitting at the oval conference table. There were 3 men and 2 women, a total of 5 people. From their appearance, they were all young people about his age. Ding Meng, this is the team I've formed. They're all from planet TT-12, so we'll be companions from now on. Finally, all of us are here. Chu Xiaoqing was obviously in high spirits at this moment. It was obvious that she had spent some time in order to form this team. Those who were chosen by Chu Xiaoqing were naturally not weaklings. Before Ding Meng could even open his telekinesis vision, he felt an oppressive heat pressing down on him. A burly man with an ordinary face had already reached out his hand and introduced himself. Long Ming, long as in flying dragon, Ming as in whistle. Hello, welcome to the team. Although this man's appearance was very ordinary, his words were concise and full of energy. It was obvious that he was a thermodynamic origin energy user. Most importantly, Long Ming's manner was extremely calm, which was not a temperament that someone of his age should possess. Chu Xiaoqing smiled. Ding Meng, you might not know this, but Brother Long is also a student of our Leaston Academy. He definitely won't have a problem passing this year's exam. His overall strength is ranked 3rd in our academy, and he is undoubtedly one of the best in the Northern District's thermodynamic origin energy user. Long Ming shook his head slightly. Miss Chu, you flatter me. Ding Meng nodded politely. Hello, Brother Long. Long Ming replied politely. Ding Meng. You could just call me Ao Long. Ding Meng. Sister Chu, did you say that his name is Ding Meng? A shrill and surprised female voice rang out from the side. He turned his head and saw a beautiful girl with bright eyes and white teeth walking over. She had a slender figure, light steps, and long hair. She was wearing a set of standard pink sportswear, and she looked bright, confident, and cheerful. This girl gave off the feeling that as long as you looked at her, you would feel extremely happy. Chu Xiaoqing introduced her. This is Sister Xing Yi. She's from Starry Sky and E from Arts. She's also from Leaston Academy. She's an expert in the Western District Combat Department and is ranked in the top 10. Xing Yi hesitated. Are you that? Let me think. Right? I remember now. I heard that there's only one student in the Western District's Classical Swordsmanship Department, and that student is called Ding Meng. Chu Xiaoqing smiled. Yes, that's him. Teacher Zhao's favorite student, Ding Meng. At this moment, Xing Yi looked at Ding Ming with not only surprise, but also admiration. I heard that Sister Hong, from a Northern District's fighting department, was beaten to a pulp by you in just a few moves? Chu Xiaoqing nodded. I can confirm that because I was there at the time. Wow, wow. Xing Yi suddenly jumped up. Well done. Our academy finally has a manly student standing up for justice. She immediately gave a thumbs up to Ding Ming. Good job, brother Ding Ming. I admire you. You are really my idol. Yo, this wild girl. Little rascal was immediately dissatisfied. Look at how excited she is. How difficult is it to deal with a rookie like Sister Hong? Idol? Ding Ming, are you the target of her disgust? Ding Ming could only lower his eyelids and not answer. If he dared to answer such a topic, little rascal would immediately start his beauty review. The final conclusion would either be to date her or to try her hand. Yes. To be honest, Ding Ming also wanted to do such a thing. However, it was just a thought, because at this moment, a discordant voice suddenly sounded. What is Hong Mei's ranking? If I remember correctly, she is ranked 19th. Defeating a 19th ranked origin ability user. What is there to be proud of? The person who spoke was a tall and thin boy. His face was very delicate and his hair was a bit long. However, his face had a rebellious expression. Moreover, he was wearing a luxurious beige windbreaker. It seemed that he wanted to show off his elegant and free temperament. Unfortunately, he was too young. Some temperaments could not be embellished by his expression and clothes. For some reason, a similar person appeared in Ding Ming's mind when she saw him. A pair of deep eyes, a handsome and sunny face, a mysterious and confident smile, chatting and laughing amidst the fierce and perverted pursuit of the enemy, operating the swordfish spaceship to perform amazing dodging in the rain of bullets. Even in the face of imminent death, he still remained calm and maintained his poise. Even if he was wearing a tattered crew uniform, that aristocratic elegance was something that the boy in front of her could not compare to. That man named Xinjia, where did he go? I wonder if he's still alive? Xing Yi's voice pulled Ding Ming back from his thoughts. Randy, let me ask you, did you enter the top 20? This boy named Randy had a face of disdain. Strength has never been reflected by ranking. Xing Yi blinked and smiled. Sister Chu also didn't enter the top 20. Is her strength inferior to Hong Mei's? How is that possible? Randy's expression immediately changed. When facing others, he had a face of arrogance. But when facing Chu Xiaoqing, he was very gentle. Xiaoqing, I think Hong Mei really wants to fight with you. She doesn't have a chance. Don't you think so? Chu Xiaoqing smiled very generously. Randy, I still think it's better for you to call me Miss Chu. Otherwise, it will cause misunderstandings. Randy's face suddenly turned red. He shouted, That won't do. Xiaoqing, you are the best. Moreover, we have been classmates for many years. Of course, our relationship is different. How is it different? Tell me about it. Xing Yi looked at him with a smile that was not a smile. Randy was speechless, but his face turned even redder. Ding Ming could see that this Randy was obviously Chu Xiaoqing's pursuer. However, he could not see Randy's strength because he could not feel any origin energy fluctuations from him. However, since he appeared here, there must be a reason for him to appear. Chapter 105. Hello, I'm Ding Ming. You could just call me Clory. A blonde, blue-eyed, muscular boy took the initiative to shake his hand. Chu Xiaoqing introduced, Ding Ming, I'm Clory from Suifeng Oasis Superconductor Academy. He's my classmate from elementary school. He's a very powerful combat expert. Ding Ming could naturally feel that Clory's aura was exactly the same as Lei Bao's. He was probably an electromagnetic type origin ability user. However, Clory might have come from another oasis on planet TT-12, so he didn't like to talk much. After greeting them, he sat down and took out an old paper book. In such a noisy environment, he actually started reading by himself. The green cover was quite beautiful. The title of the book was something like Peach Blossom Spring. The author's name was also awe-inspiring. Border Town, Longzi. The last young girl also came from Suifeng Oasis. She was very short, about the same height as Xiao Qiu. She and Xing Yi were two completely opposite types. Xing Yi was lively and cheerful, but she was dull and quiet. Xing Yi had a kind of healthy beauty, but she was neither beautiful nor ugly. Her short hair, matched with her ordinary face, made her look like a quiet child standing there. Ruo, as in lawn, as in orchid. Ruo Lan's self-introduction was very brief. When she introduced herself, her eyes were fixed on Xiao Qiu. Xiao Qiu was indeed somewhat similar to her. Ding Ming quickly explained, just call her Xiao Qiu. She's an Ice-type origin ability user. This time, 8 young men and women gathered in the conference room. Among them, Xing Yi and Randy were the most talkative. They chattered nonstop. Everyone was obviously very excited, because basically everyone present was a student of the academy. This was the first time they had accepted a special mission from the military. In the Norse Empire, this was considered a very glorious thing. However, this lively atmosphere didn't last long. Soon, everyone quieted down at the same time and turned their eyes to the door. The person had yet to arrive, but an extremely powerful aura had already spread from the outside. This was clearly a thermal energy user. After all, thermal energy was the mainstream energy in this world. Anyone who had cultivated to a high level would usually be a thermal energy user. The door of the conference room was pushed open, and the first person to enter was an old man in an Imperial Army uniform. His hair was already a little white, but the medal on his chest indicated his identity, the rank of colonel. When they saw the military rank, Chu Shaoqing and the others stood up to show their respect. In the Nuoxing Empire, those with this rank were all outstanding soldiers who had made great contributions to their country. No matter where they went, they were respected. The old man's spirit was hale and hearty, and his forehead was filled with a kind of resolute majesty. However, when he saw the room full of young people, his expression immediately became gentle. He waved his hand and said, sit, all of you sit down and talk. Sister Zhong took 2 steps forward and looked a little excited. Elder Feng, long time no see. Senior Feng sat down at the head of the table and replied with a smile. So, it's little Zhong. I remember you. We met at the front line more than 30 years ago. Sister Zhong praised. At that time, I was saved by you. I have always remembered it in my heart. It's nothing. Besides, we are all citizens of our empire. Senior Feng waved his hand and smiled. But first, little Zhong, you can't accompany us on this mission. Why? Sister Zhong was surprised. Naturally, she wasn't participating in any special mission. She was protecting Chu Xiaoqing's safety. Old man Feng smiled meaningfully. I can understand that young people are eager to serve their motherland. However, if a jade is not cut, it will not become useful. A flower in a greenhouse will always remain in a greenhouse. Whether it can blossom and bear fruit will always be tested by the outside world. As soon as these words came out, Ding Ming immediately realized that this was not an easy task. This was also his question. The Empire's military was so powerful that even they couldn't handle it. What could a few young people like him do? Sister Zhong lowered her head and said with a sigh, Senior Feng, your instructions are right. At this time, Ding Ming quietly opened his telekinetic vision. He even carefully probed forward with his telekinetic wave. Unfortunately, what he encountered this time was not an invisible film, but a giant steel wall that stood at the top of a mountain. His telekinetic wave couldn't even get close to it, let alone pass through it. As soon as he opened his vision, he was bounced back by an invisible pressure. His eyes were dazzled, and his head hurt. He almost fainted. Ding Ming was shocked and quickly closed his telekinetic vision. The strength of this colonel was unfathomable. Senior Feng suddenly turned his head and glanced at Ding Ming intentionally or unintentionally. Then, he glanced at everyone and showed a satisfied smile. They are all young talents. They are all good children. When he said this, an adjutant behind him had turned off his wristwatch and nodded slightly to him. This meant that he had investigated the identity of these young people again. There was no problem with the identity of these young people. Senior Feng clapped his hands and raised his voice. Young students, I know you must be very curious. Why did the Empire's military have to carry out a special mission in such a remote place? Why did they recruit you as members of the operation? Now, Second Lieutenant Wood will answer your questions. The adjutant behind him immediately took 2 steps forward, gave a standard military salute to everyone, and said in a high-pitched voice, "Hello, everyone. My name is Wood, and I serve in the patrol fleet of the TCP-121 Nebula of the North Star Empire. I am a second lieutenant, and I am also the initiator of this operation." Finally, someone couldn't help but speak first. It was Xing. "Mr. Second Lieutenant, I would like to know what kind of mission we are on this time." Wood said, "This student from Star Art, I can tell you first that our mission objective is to find a fallen spaceship." Xing Yi's beautiful eyes widened. "It's that simple?" Wood couldn't help but laugh. "It's not simple, Xing Yi. First of all, it's a spaceship of the Empire's military. Second, it crashed a long time ago. I believe that our compatriots on the ship have already died. Our mission is to go to the crash site, find the crash site, salvage their bones, bring their bodies back, and send them back to their hometowns for a proper burial." For a moment, the conference room was silent. Although Wood's words were short, they made everyone feel a kind of high respect. The Empire was never stingy with its soldiers who silently contributed. Xing Yi nodded thoughtfully. "So that's how it is." Randy raised his hand and said, "Excuse me, where's the crash site?" Wood put away his smile and said seriously, "It's not in the jurisdiction of the Empire or the Federation, but it's not far from the Federation's jurisdiction. It's still within the range of the Federation's jurisdiction." That's right. Everyone was suddenly enlightened. Not being in the jurisdiction of the Empire meant that the Empire's fleet couldn't be easily dispatched. Close to the Federation's area of observation, the Empire couldn't dispatch a large number of forces or experts because it would cause unnecessary misunderstandings. Furthermore, even if the Federation discovered a group of students salvaging the bones of the Empire soldiers, they would be allowed to do so because of humanitarian policy. After all, what could a group of young students do to the situation between the two countries? It was impossible for them to pose a threat to the Federation's border. Xing Yi and the others started whispering to each other. They were obviously discussing the difficulty of this mission. However, Elder Feng's gaze fell on Ding Meng, who was thinking alone. He suddenly said, "Ding Meng and Lan Xiao are still interstellar refugees. I can guarantee that if this mission is completed successfully, not only will you be a third-class citizen of the Norse Empire, but you will also be able to join the Empire's military and become 2 outstanding soldiers." Everyone turned their heads again. No one could tell that these 2 people were actually interstellar refugees. However, everyone felt that it was very interesting because it was very suitable for them to go to the target area as interstellar refugees. There were originally people in outer space who specialized in this line of work, and the interstellar hunter was one of the best. Ding Meng was still expressionless. He only just found out that Xiao Qiu's full name was Lan Xiao. Wood continued, "Students, you can actually think of this mission as a fleet patrol mission. It will train your personal abilities in a field environment. This is not something you can learn in school. However, no matter where you are in space, there are unknown risks and variables. You are the future hope of the Norse Empire. So before you set off, we have to make as many preparations as possible to ensure your safety on the interstellar journey." Long Ming also raised his hand. His voice was very low. "What kind of preparations do we have to make?" Old Feng suddenly opened his mouth. "Everyone, I know that you are about to face a big exam. Everyone also knows that once you pass the exam, you will be a true warrior. I believe that the Superpower Center on planet TT-12 will authenticate you very well, but once the authentication is successful, your names will all be recorded in the Empire's Origin Ability authentication system. If you encounter an enemy of the Norse Empire during this mission, I'm worried that your safety won't be guaranteed." These words were very difficult to understand. So Xing Yi asked again, "If we encounter an enemy, what kind of enemy will it be?" Randy sneered and replied, "If we really encounter an enemy like that, I'm afraid we won't be able to come back." "Why?" Xing Yi still did not understand. Randy sneered even more. "Think about it. The moment the enemy sees us, the first thing they will do will definitely be to check our identities. Once they know that we are soldiers certified by the Empire, they will definitely not let us go. This time, Xing Yi understood. If they were not soldiers but origin ability users who had not been promoted yet, it would be difficult for the enemy to distinguish whether they were the future of the Empire or the fledgling of the Federation. They might not necessarily kill them, so the risk factor would naturally be reduced. Little Rascal could not help but ask, "Ding Ming, is what he said true?" Ding Ming's expression was dark, and he did not answer. In fact, Randy's answer made a certain amount of sense. In space, regardless of whether they were enemies or allies, as long as they had the slightest bit of brain, they would not rashly attack someone of unknown origin before confirming their position and identity. His encounter with Xinjia was a typical example. If the person the Empire's patrol fleet rescued was confirmed to be an origin ability warrior of the Federation, even if they did not immediately kill you, they would at least bring you back and imprison you. Then, they would raise conditions with the Federation. They would not even need to think about asking for too much. However, despite Elder Feng's explanation, Ding Ming's doubts were still not dispelled. This special military mission was definitely not as easy as he thought. His past experience told him that as long as he was in an area not under the jurisdiction of the Empire, it was never an easy task. Just as Second Lieutenant Wood had said, there were too many unknown risks and variables in space. The world was bizarre, and the universe was complicated. There were many things that one could not even imagine. Chapter 106. The meeting continued, and Second Lieutenant Wood's tone sounded more like he was trying to console everyone. Students, as I said earlier, no matter where you are, as long as you leave the borders of the Norxing Empire, there will be unknown dangers. Therefore, the quality of your bodies is of utmost importance. The strength of your bodies will determine the duration of this mission, as well as your chances of survival in this dangerous situation. Even though they were mentally prepared, when they heard the words chances of survival, everyone's faces still changed slightly. The change in everyone's expressions naturally did not escape Wood's eyes. His tone suddenly became low and serious. Therefore, the military will adopt the principle of voluntary participation in this rescue operation. If you're unwilling to participate, we will not force you. We will immediately send you back to the surface of planet TT-12. How about it? Is there anyone who is willing to withdraw? The meeting room was silent. No one spoke. Little Rascal could not help but ask, "Ding Ming, are we going or not?" In truth, Ding Ming was also hesitating. If he went, the difficulty of the mission would not be low. However, if he did not go, he had a feeling that people like Salazar would come looking for trouble with him one after another, and the people who would come looking for him were likely to be stronger than Salazar. Back when he was on Dome Planet, he had learned from Vader and Bamboo Pole that there was someone behind the surprise raid mercenary group that was paying attention to the K-Virus. The surprise raid mercenary group had more than one stronghold in Black Gold Base. If even Black Gold Base was in such a state, then the person behind it must be a Colossus. If he did not go now, he would have to face this Colossus sooner or later. It was best to leave planet TT-12 first before making any plans. Ding Ming's gaze suddenly fell on Chu Xiaoqing. Chu Xiaoqing's clothes were beautiful, and her face was as beautiful as a flower. There was a faint smile on her face, and she looked confident and high-spirited. Ding Ming felt a rare tinge of emotion. Young people of the same age as him, while others were well-fed, had a bright future, and were seriously planning their own futures, he himself had never been treated like this. He had always lived a life of poverty and hardship, and most of the time he had to struggle between life and death. There was almost no future to speak of. This was the Norse Empire, where human society was highly developed. Why was there such a huge difference between people? Ding Ming suddenly felt a surge of courage. Go, we must go. He also yearned for citizenship and military qualifications, but there was no such thing as a free lunch in this world. Through hard work, he could also obtain it. The meeting room was still quiet, and Wood's voice was still echoing. I'll ask you one last time. Is there anyone who wants to quit? What answered him was still silence. Wood's spirit was suddenly lifted. Very good. Our Norse Empire's origin ability users are all good. No one has ever backed down. Elder Fong continued. Dear students, before we depart, we will conduct some tests and training for you. This is to ensure your safety as much as possible. Of course, I believe that you will have no problem passing the test. Your courage is commendable, but the necessary procedures still need to be followed. I hope you can understand. Claus raised his hand. When will the test begin? Wood replied, time is tight. We will do our best to speed things up. The test will be conducted in this building this afternoon. The induction and nutrition cabins on the second floor will be provided for everyone to use for free. Everyone, please prepare as soon as possible. In the next 3 days, we will conduct a simple training for everyone so that we can depart as soon as possible. Does anyone have any questions? If not, this meeting is over. As soon as he finished speaking, Elder Fong stood up and the military personnel left the meeting room one by one. As soon as the military personnel left, everyone began to chatter. Only Ding Meng and Long Ming seemed to be quiet in the room. They sat in their chairs and seemed to be thinking. Brother Long, Ding Meng, now that you know about the mission, you two are so quiet. Are you confident? Chu Shaoqing walked over. Long Ming shook his head slightly. Miss Chu, it's hard to say. The second lieutenant just reminded us that there are many risks and variables in space. Ding Meng said, what kind of test is it? Chu Shaoqing smiled. Actually, it's not difficult. The main thing is that there are some indicators for origin ability users. You have to meet the basic requirements. Long Ming explained, it's mainly an assessment of origin ability users of different types. It's like the certification of the Superpower Center. Ding Meng nodded silently. He couldn't help but raise his vigilance. He couldn't let anyone see through the K-virus. Little Rascal said, Ding Meng, don't worry. I'll enter hibernation mode this afternoon. No one will be able to detect my existence. She came to this conclusion a bit too early. At this moment, in the elevator on the top floor, as the hatch slowly closed, Elder Fong slowly opened his mouth. Do you have any special opinions about this batch of students? Wood obviously didn't understand what he meant. Their quality is not bad. Based on my feeling, they should be the best of the best on this planet. Elder Fong said, it's not the same. Wood hurriedly asked, Sir, please give me a few pointers. Elder Fong revealed a trace of a mysterious smile. Did you know that during the meeting just now, they were secretly investigating me? Wood couldn't help but laugh. He had also experienced this before. Young people's strength was still shallow. Once they saw a powerful expert appear, they couldn't help but try to sense their strength. In the end, they were usually suppressed by the opponent's fluctuations. This group of young students was definitely the same. They were filled with curiosity towards experts. Sir, you've always been very protective of young people. What was full of praise? What kind of concept was a colonel in the Empire? They had long surpassed the level of origin energy warriors. Even the weakest were origin energy warriors. With just a slight thought, a gaze was enough to suppress these students, making them not dare to look at them. However, Elder Fong clearly didn't do this. He had been cheerfully explaining the mission to these students. You're wrong. Elder Fong suddenly withdrew his smile. There are 2 students that you must pay attention to. One is called Ding Meng, and the other is called Lan Xiao. Oh, Wood was curious. Elder Fong seemed to be recalling the situation from before. That girl called Lan Xiao. Her ice element origin ability is quite extraordinary. When I walked into the meeting room just now, I discovered that the origin of her energy didn't seem to be from her heart. Wood was shocked. It was rare for Elder Fong to speak so highly of him. The key was that the origin of her origin ability was actually not from her heart. In other words, her ice element origin ability technique was different from most origin ability users. As everyone knew, the origin of heat and ice element origin ability techniques were often constructed from the heart. It wasn't that they couldn't use other parts of the body as the origin, but such techniques were very rare. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that they were as rare as phoenix feathers and Chilan horns. Thus, the effects of cultivating them would definitely be different. She has a secret technique manual? Wood came to a realization. Elder Feng laughed again. That's her business. We have no right to interfere with other people's privacy. However, no matter what, if such a person becomes a soldier of the Empire, then it's our fortune. The Empire will have another talent. Wood was very impressed by Elder Feng's breadth of mind. He quickly lowered his head and said, "Sir, you really love and care for young people." Elder Feng continued, "That student called Ding Ming is even more extraordinary. He should be an origin ability user of heat energy. However, his origin ability technique has been cultivated to perfection. Even I almost couldn't see it." With Elder Feng's strength, if he almost couldn't see it, then it was impossible for Wood to perceive it. This meant that Ding Ming's origin ability technique had reached a level where he could freely control it. Once he withdrew his origin ability technique, he would become like an ordinary person. However, if he released his origin ability technique, he would be able to do it quickly and easily. Wood was stunned for a moment. Then he sighed and said, "I really didn't expect that there would be such a young person nowadays. He's actually willing to work so hard to train his foundation." Elder Feng looked at him indifferently and said, "That Ding Ming isn't just like that. When he was observing me just now, he didn't use his origin ability technique. Instead, he used another unique perception technique." Would open his mouth wide. Other than the fluctuation of origin ability technique itself, there's another perception technique? There is. Elder Feng's face became serious. The world of origin ability has always been strange. There are all kinds of secret techniques and manuals. What Ding Ming used seems to be an ability similar to true vision. It's very similar, but it's also somewhat similar to the mind's telekinesis. As he said this, his gaze fell through the elevator window into the distance. It seemed that he was recalling something from a long time ago. Suddenly, he sighed slightly. Many years ago, when we were at war with the Federation, one of my comrades had this ability. We call this ability multidimensional perspective. It's a very magical ability. It allows you to observe places that you can't normally see. On the battlefield, this ability can save many people's lives. It can even turn the tide of a battle. Wood was so shocked that he couldn't speak. After a long time, he said, "Sir, I'm afraid that Senior was an expert in reconnaissance, right?" Elder Feng nodded. "We worked together for 15 years. We relied on him a lot in every operation." Unfortunately, sigh. His tone was full of regret. It was obvious that his comrade had died. Otherwise, he would definitely be a famous person with outstanding military exploits to survive until now. Wood lowered his head and said sadly, "That Senior must be a talent that the Norse Empire values very much." Elder Feng nodded. "It's a blessing for a soldier to die on the battlefield. We don't need to be sad." Wood straightened his chest. "Yes, sir." Elder Feng said, "Does Ding Ming have this ability?" "I'm not sure yet. His true vision is still too weak. It can only be regarded as a budding ability. However, there's already such a talent in this batch of young students. You must take extra care during the training. He's still a refugee. We must keep such a talent in the Norse Empire." Chapter 107. The test was conducted on the 10th floor of the building. This was a multi-purpose metal hall that covered an area of more than 1,000 square meters. In the center lay a huge silver machine that looked like a giant pumpkin. Liquid metal flowed on the surface of the pumpkin, and the silver luster was as smooth and beautiful as origin energy. Looking at it from afar, one could feel a cold, noble, and powerful aura of technology. Wood began to introduce it to everyone. "Students, this is the Kaja International Space Virtual Server." Before he finished the introduction, Star Art and Randy exclaimed excitedly, "Wow, so this is the Kaja server. We finally get to see it today." The International Space Virtual Server's main purpose was to serve this Star Wars League. It could connect the communication between the Federation and the Empire and achieve real-time transmission and synchronization across multiple galaxies. The inventor was the Holy Grail Federation's famous statistician, Lin Kajia. Therefore, this model of server was called the Kajia server. Compared to the Norse Empire's military strength, the Holy Grail Federation's technology was more advanced. It was obvious that this machine was imported from the Federation by the Empire at a huge cost. To run it, ordinary electricity was far from enough. First of all, there had to be enough crystal sources to keep it on, and to really use the functions of scanning, collecting, synthesizing, creating, and entering various kinds of colorful virtual worlds. One had to rely on the energy of the inverse source crystal. Even Ding Meng knew about the inverse source crystal. Origin energy was everywhere in the universe, but it was dense in some places and sparse in others. However, due to various cosmic phenomena, celestial changes, unknown forces, and coincidences, the origin energy finally condensed into a stable solid crystal. This was the so-called inverse source crystal. The energy it contained was unimaginable to humans. So far, no one had thoroughly studied the inverse source crystal. The inverse source crystal was divided into two major categories: the original and the artificial. The original crystals were naturally formed after a long period of time in the universe, and their value was immeasurable. The Norse Empire and the Frogman Kingdom were still at war because of the discovery of the original inverse source crystal in the fertile chalk system. The artificial reverse crystal was made by adding a crystal source to an inferior crystal for catalysis. Naturally, the quality was much worse. Even so, the artificial crystal still had a huge amount of energy and was infinitely powerful. To operate a commendable server, one would need at least one artificial reverse source crystal. Even if it was the lowest quality crystal, the cost would be in the hundreds of millions. For origin ability users, this was an astronomical figure. With the Kajia server as the center, the walls of the hall were all embedded with small connecting cabins similar to induction cabins. Under the guidance of Wood, Ding Meng and the other 8 people entered the cabins one after another. After the hinges were closed, the server began to operate. The connecting cabins released pure energy that could make people directly enter the state of meditation. Ding Meng felt as if he was lying in a warm bathtub. His whole body was surrounded by waves of heat, and it was very warm and comfortable. After an unknown amount of time, the autumn sun seemed to have fallen on top of his head, and a golden light appeared in front of his eyes. Then, the scene changed. He felt like he was on a spaceship. Looking out the window, he could see the stars in outer space. Far away, between 2 stars, one big and one small, 2 fleets were fighting fiercely. Countless spaceships were flying back and forth, covering the sky. All kinds of spaceships, mechas, and battle armors were bursting with all kinds of firepower in outer space. The scene was magnificent and dazzling, making one want to fly over and join the battle immediately. At this time, a beautiful and gentle female system voice sounded. "Welcome to the world of Star Wars. Please create your ID." A beautiful interface quickly popped up, and there was only one blank option: name. Ding Meng thought for a moment. Since this was a virtual world, it was better not to use his real name. Let's call it Little Rascal. Ding Meng was too lazy to think about it. This name was not bad. N. Short and easy to remember. Fortunately, Little Rascal had automatically gone into hibernation. Otherwise, she would definitely have the urge to strangle Ding Meng to death. Of all the names you could have, you just had to use my nickname. System voice. "Sorry, this nickname has been registered." It was normal for it to be registered. This name was indeed a little too simple. Ding Meng thought for a moment, then said, "Little Rascal." System voice. "Sorry, this nickname has been registered." Was it not easy to register a name with 2 or 3 words? After all, the combined population of the Empire and the Federation was in the trillions. It was indeed difficult to not repeat a name. In that case, I'll use a longer name. "A good name doesn't have to be especially long," Ding Meng said. System voice. "Sorry, this nickname has been registered." F***, no way, right? Someone actually registered such a tricky name? Who is it? What talent? "Give me a unique name," Ding Meng asked again. The system voice said, "Sorry, that nickname has already been registered." Ding Meng said, can you give me a kiss? The system's voice said, sorry, the nickname has been, I love a matchstick. Sorry, that nickname has been, once upon a time, there was a temple, and inside the temple was a mountain. Sorry, that nickname, show me the money. I'm sorry, I'm tired. I'm tired. I'm tired. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. What the hell is going on? Ding Ming could not help but ask. Then what should we do? The system voice said, congratulations. The nickname, what should I do, has been successfully registered. Ding Ming was speechless. How could the registration be completed just like that? What a cheating system. The system voice said, character creation is successful. Please confirm your physical characteristics. At this time, the interface changed again. Just like in Little Rascal's mind space, a virtual image of himself appeared. Even the school uniform was exactly the same, but the appearance seemed to be a little uglier. If one did not know him well, they would not be able to tell that this was Ding Ming. With a whoosh, a white light flashed, and the virtual image was transported to a new world. Ding Ming opened his eyes and saw that he was standing in a desert. Above him was a night sky full of stars, and below him was a desolate land. There seemed to be plenty of light, and this was clearly a barren and distant planet. At this moment, white light beams appeared in the sky, and the virtual images of everyone were transported in one by one. The first person to be transported in was Wood. He basically did not change much. He was still wearing the military uniform, and his face did not change either. However, the ID above his head was Empire's 115TT 1266 Glory. This was obviously a military code. Next, it was Ding Ming's turn to be depressed. This was because he saw the other IDs, and each one was better than the last. Randy had obviously beautified his figure and appearance. He was simply a handsome man. His ID was Cold Moon Sunset Drunk on Cool Breeze, Ice Like Frozen Plum Blossom. I say, are you writing couplets or poetry? Why are you making it so poetic? Do you need to be so cultured? Randy was clearly not the only cultured one. Chu Xiaoqing's appearance was also beautified. She was as beautiful as a fairy, and her ID was even neatly matched. At first I didn't hear the meaning of the song, but after hearing it again, I became a person of the song. You guys are really amazing. What are you cultivating origin energy for? Go be a poet. That's a promising career. Ding Ming secretly cursed. When he turned his head to look, Claw's name was really eye-catching. Your wedding dress, my Kasaya. Big brother, what are you doing? Others are wearing wedding dresses, and you're wearing a Kasaya? You want to become a monk just because you don't like it? I really can't catch up to your realm. This little brother admires you. What also made him admire Xing Yi's ID was, a mouth is a blade of grass. What does that mean? Ding Ming was very confused. Xing Yi giggled and explained, you're taking my name apart. Damn, that's also possible. Ding Ming prostrated himself in admiration. You could take a blade of grass just by stretching out your mouth? Is that what it means? If the previous names were difficult to come up with, then Long Ming's name was extremely simple. Your mother's kiss. This name was concise and comprehensive. It had a deep meaning. It was simple and direct. It was hard to tell that the outwardly steady Long Ming actually had a restless heart and obtained such a wonderful name. Xiao Qiu's ID was even simpler. Ice Plum. It was actually only 2 words. How did you manage to register it? This didn't make sense. Compared to their unique IDs, Ruo Lan's ID was much more normal. Lan Lan's night. Looking at his own ID, Ding Ming couldn't help but want to vomit blood. It really didn't have any distinguishing features. What should I do? Seeing that everyone had been transferred, Wood said in a deep voice, students, we are now in region protection mode. Please remember your ID. In the world of Star Wars, this is your only identification. The server will implement the highest level of encryption on your body's real data. It won't reveal your information to any third party. It will only evaluate the strength you have displayed. This is also the reason why we want to test you. Then what are we going to test? Xingthi couldn't help but ask. It's very simple. Wood gently waved his hand. A beam of light descended from the sky, creating a crystal-clear cylinder in the middle of the open space. The cylinder wasn't tall, only about 3 meters tall. It was just enough to accommodate one person. The first thing we want to do is to test your Origin Ability Index. Wood explained, after all, you haven't been certified by the Superpower Center. This thing can test Origin Ability Index. Xing Yi expressed her doubts. Under normal circumstances, the Superpower Center's specialized equipment would be used for accurate evaluation. However, she quickly dispelled her doubts. The Superpower Center was only officially certified. This was the world of Star Wars where the inverse crystal operated. Under the effect of the powerful energy crystal, what kind of person's data couldn't be measured? Would look at everyone and smiled. Before the test begins, I want to remind everyone that we will distribute different supplies or corresponding resources according to the results of the test. So, everyone must take it seriously. How about it? Who wants to go first? At this moment, everyone understood. This mission was bound to encounter unpredictable obstacles and difficulties. Equipment and supplies were undoubtedly important, but they were also distributed according to one's strength. At this moment, even Ding Meng was full of expectations. The military resources of the Norse Empire shouldn't be bad, right? Chapter 108. Let me do it. The first one to raise her hand was the energetic Xing Yi. She slowly walked into the pillar and stood there. Wood smiled. Student Xing Yi, follow my instructions for the first step. Please circulate the origin energy in your body. Xing Yi's smile disappeared and her expression became serious. She took a deep breath, as if she was slowly stretching her limbs. At this moment, the pillar was no longer in its crystal-clear state. The surface of the pillar began to change color like a mirror, releasing a white light. A virtual screen immediately appeared beside the cylinder, displaying real-time data in a very intuitive manner. Name, Xing Yi. Gender, female. Age, 23. ID, 1 life. Grass Flick. Origin Energy Index, 50 points, 100 points, 150 points, 200 points, 250 points. From the data, it could be seen that Xing Yi's Origin Energy Index was very stable, steadily increasing at 50 points. This was enough to prove that her foundation was very solid. As the Origin Energy Index continued to rise, the color of the mirror on the pillar became whiter and whiter. It could be said that it was bright white. Clearly, Xing Yi's Origin Energy Index had been completely activated. A new evaluation column appeared on the screen. Cultivation Method, Imperial Wind Technique, Flying Star Technique, Godly Movement Technique. Physical Fitness, C grade level 3. Seeing these 2 lines, everyone was shocked. Imperial Wind Technique was a light-speed cultivation method. This meant that Xing Yi was a light-speed cultivator. However, she had practiced 3 different cultivation methods at the same time. This foundation could be said to be incomparably solid. A C grade level 3 physical fitness was actually quite outstanding. Most of the Empire's soldiers were C grade. Level 3 physical fitness meant that Xing Yi had already surpassed the level 1 physical fitness of a normal soldier. At this moment, even the smile on Wood's face became wider. For a student to reach this level was already very commendable. The Origin Energy Index continued to rise. 2,800 points, 2,900 points, 3,000 points, 3,100 points, 3,200 points. As the pillar completely transformed into a pillar of light, the Origin Energy Index finally stopped at 3,684 points. This was already the standard for a beginner Origin Energy Warrior. Ruo Lan revealed an envious expression. So powerful. 3,600 points of Origin Energy Index. If only I had that high. Chloral nodded. Not bad. Chu Xiaoqing smiled and said, the top 10 students of our Listen Academy are naturally outstanding. This was the truth. A simple comparison between Little Red and Star Art was enough to tell that if Little Red were to fight against Star Art, she would have no chance of winning. At this moment, Wood said in a deep voice, student from Star Art, if you don't mind, please display your martial skills. The system will keep it strictly confidential. At the same time, the evaluation data will give you extra points. Actually, there was no need to keep a secret. Everyone in the open space couldn't see Star Art's real body. The light from the cylindrical mirror was too dazzling. They could only vaguely see the mirror image swaying inside, but the result was quickly revealed. Martial skills, transient steps, afterimage, gale, phantom. Comprehensive evaluation score, 7,233 points. Wood said, "The test is over. Students from Star Art, please come out." The cylinder quickly returned to its original color. Xingyi bounced out and asked with a smile, "How is it? Is my score high?" Wood said with a smile, "Your score is very high. It has greatly exceeded our expectations." Ding Meng didn't have any concept of this score, but Chu Xiaoqing and the others who had seen other people's certifications at the Superpower Center had an idea. After an Origin Energy Warrior was certified, their combat score would usually be around 4,500 points. The more powerful ones would be around 5,000 points. 5,500 points were those with a very solid foundation. Those with more than 6,000 points were extremely rare. These people were considered geniuses in the eyes of others. Whether or not Xingyi's 7,233 points was a genius was still uncertain, but 3 cultivation techniques and 4 martial skills definitely added a lot of points. Perhaps his martial skills even had a few layers to them. "Let me give it a try." Claus rubbed his palms together as he walked out. He didn't plan to go first, but Chu Xiaoqing's words about the top 10 students of the Listen Academy made him a little unhappy. It seemed like only the Golden Plentiful Oasis had experts, and the Suifeng Oasis didn't have anyone. Claus didn't slow down the pace like Xingyi. As soon as he walked in, the cylinder quickly changed color. Not only did the mirror surface emit a strong purple light, but there was also a spiderweb-like electric current flowing on the surface. His Origin Energy Index jumped to 2066 points. See, everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. Even Randy said, "This guy is really fierce," Wood revealed an expectant look. His Origin Energy Index had increased so quickly. He really hoped that this little guy could bring a surprise. The surprise quickly appeared. Cultivation technique, electromagnetic pulse technique, physical fitness, grade C6 martial skills, bright connecting fist, army fist, thundercloud, 7 slaughter styles on the surface. Claus wasn't as good as Xingyi, but those in the know knew that Xingyi might not be stronger than Claus. This electromagnetic pulse technique was a 4-star cultivation technique. It wasn't something that Xingyi's 3-star cultivation techniques could surpass. Let's not talk about physical fitness, but Claus's martial skills were the most basic and common fist techniques. This proved that he had probably spent a lot of effort to train his basic skills. Sure enough, Claus's Origin Energy Index was finally fixed at 4,022 points. The system also gave a comprehensive evaluation of 8,001 points. Wow, the first to speak was actually Xingyi. She never would have thought that this low-key Claus would break through 8,000 points. Beginner Origin Energy Warriors usually had a combat index of 10,000 points. He hadn't even been certified yet. When it was time for certification, he would probably have exceeded 10,000 points. Amazing! Chu Xiaoqing couldn't help but praise. Ruolan secretly made a V sign to Claus. Claus's face was filled with pride. "It's my turn now." Randy finally stood up. This time, even Ding Meng was filled with anticipation. Before, he couldn't feel any Origin energy fluctuations from Randy. He was very curious about this guy's strength. Randy's performance was really out of Ding Meng's expectations. After he entered, the cylindrical mirror only changed color slightly. It was a kind of emerald green color, as if a layer of green gauze was covering it. This Origin energy fluctuation was obviously very weak, and it wasn't stable. However, the contents on the screen made people not dare to underestimate him. Origin Energy Index, 2288 points. Cultivation method, disorderly leaping calculation, mental cultivation method of calculation rehearsal, physical fitness, grade D2 martial skills. Ding Meng finally knew why he thought of Xian Jia when he saw Randy. This guy was very likely to be the same as Xian Jia, an Origin energy statistician. The cultivation technique he practiced was a non-combat type. The origin construction started from the brain, and the main purpose was to develop the calculation ability of the brain. Ding Ming had seen the introduction of the curve calculation rehearsal method in the Advanced Training Center of Leaston Academy. This was also a 4-star cultivation technique. The origin construction was very, very difficult. To accurately locate 4 of the 14 billion neuron nodes, this required an origin ability, user's brain ability, to be ridiculously high. Think about it. Xinjia was able to control the swordfish spaceship like a cheat during the space chase. The calculation ability of his brain was not something these combat-type origin ability users could imagine. Randy's overall evaluation score, 8,150 points. Damn. Xing couldn't help but swear. This score was even higher than Claw's. Obviously, the system favored the ability of a statistician. Randy's score couldn't be directly reflected in the combat value, but everyone knew how important a statistician was in actual combat. Claus couldn't help but look at Randy a few more times. No wonder this guy had always been so arrogant. He really had the right to be arrogant. Ding Ming's gaze landed on Chu Shaoqing. His thoughts were different. Chu Shaoqing probably placed a lot of importance on this mission, which was why she had thought through the formation of the team very thoroughly. A team definitely needed someone with high combat power, but at the same time, they also needed someone like Randy to assist them. Chu Shaoqing turned her head to look at Long Ming. "Brother Long, do you want to go, or should I?" Long Ming was very gentlemanly. He made a gesture of invitation. "Ladies first." Chu Shaoqing nodded, took a deep breath, and slowly walked into the testing pillar, which seemed to be silently nodding. This mission was accepted by Chu Shaoqing. As a member of the Chu family on planet TT-12, everyone was very curious about the strength of this proud daughter of heaven. The surface of the pillar quickly began to change color. It went from crystal clear to dim, as if an energy field was slowly dying. Everyone looked at each other. What was going on? In less than 10 seconds, the pillar made a kacha sound. The surface of the mirror actually solidified, just like a suspended sarcophagus. The sarcophagus changed color again, as if new energy had been injected into it. The surface of the sarcophagus was rapidly evolving. Finally, it turned into a metallic black color. Even from far away, they could feel the cold aura. Name, Chu Shaoqing. Gender, female. Age, 22. ID. At first, I didn't understand the meaning of the song, but after listening to it again, I became a person of the Song Origin Ability Index. 3,053 points cultivation technique. Resilient Nirvana technique, Crystal Armor Physical Fitness, Grade B, Level 2 Martial Arts, 9 forms of Swallow Attack, Exploding Heavenly Star, Cloud Steps. If they only looked at this information, they might not feel anything. They might even feel that Chu Shaoqing was a bit mediocre. The people present didn't know what Tenacious Nirvana art was, but Crystal Armor was a 4-star cultivation technique. This meant that Chu Shaoqing would be the shield at the front of the team in battle. However, she was a good tank and meat shield. Why would she practice offensive martial arts and even practice footwork? Wasn't this contradictory? However, the system's overall evaluation was 9,148 points. This time, Xingyi wanted to curse, but she couldn't because she was completely stunned. Not only her, but everyone else was shocked. What exactly was this situation? Long Ming seemed to be talking to himself. A Grade B physical fitness is so high. Everyone suddenly understood. No wonder her score was so high. Miss Chu's physical fitness was top-notch. To have such a good foundation at such a young age, she was indeed a proud daughter of heaven. Others were secretly envious, but Ding Ming wasn't surprised at all. He knew that Chu Shaoqing was training in a rare 5-star cultivation technique. She also had the strength of quenching and heat. It was normal for her to have such a score. Instead, he felt that Chu Shaoqing's progress was a bit slow. 2 months had passed, and she had broken through, but her origin ability index hadn't increased by more than 200 points. There were probably too many miscellaneous things that affected her cultivation. Shaoqing, I knew you weren't simple. It turns out that you've improved so quickly recently. Randy had already smiled and greeted her. I've already said that you're the best. Such a high score is really worthy of celebration. Chu Xiaoqing still had a smile on her face as she replied, It's not as exaggerated as you say. I'm very average. The best people are behind me. When she said this, her gaze swept over Long Ming and Ding Ming. Chapter 109. Long Ming was a little embarrassed by Chu Xiaoqing's gaze. He gently smiled and said, Since everyone has taken the test, then I'll embarrass myself. Although he said he would embarrass himself, no one doubted that the person who entered the test pillar wouldn't do their best. After Long Ming went in, the changes on the surface of the mirror were just as everyone had expected. The red color of the thermodynamic system appeared. The pillar was like a burning flame that dyed the surrounding space red. The color even reflected on everyone's faces like ripe apples. Origin Ability Index, 4,800 points. Cultivation Method, Blazing Double Star Flame. Physical Fitness, Grade B, First Grade. Martial Techniques, Bright Fist, Army Boxing, Flame Energy Rushing Fist, Flame Energy Penetrating, Flame Energy Spatial Style. Comprehensive Evaluation Score, 10,200 points. This time, not to mention the others, even Ding Ming was a little surprised. He had felt that Long Ming was extraordinary before. He really lived up to his name. Not famous, but famous. With an index of 4,800 points, he had already far surpassed others. A 4-star martial arts technique would definitely have a solid foundation. His B-Class 1 physical fitness had obviously gone through a long period of training. As for the cultivation of martial arts, it was even more particular. Scientific, systematic, step-by-step, from shallow to deep, from easy to difficult. It must have been guided by a famous expert. If Long Ming's information could be evaluated, it would be that his cultivation method, body, martial arts, and origin energy were all in perfect harmony at this stage of his cultivation. Just like a shuttle car, it might be a low-grade brand at the moment, but its structure, components, assembly, power, performance, and price were the best combination of similar products. It didn't have any special advantages, but it was absolutely flawless. It was trustworthy and reassuring. For a moment, no one opened their mouths to speak. 10,000 battle points scared everyone. Brother Long had not yet participated in the exam, but he was already a beginner-level origin energy warrior. Moreover, he was one of the best beginner-level origin energy warriors. After a long time, Star Art sighed, worthy of being in the top 3 of our Listen Academy. Brother Long is usually really low-key. Randy curled his lips. Looking at his expression, he wanted to say something to refute Star Art, but in the end, he looked at the dazzling 10,200 points on the screen and didn't say anything. Wood also sighed meaningfully. This year's examination in the Jinfeng Oasis will be very interesting. When he heard the words Jinfeng Oasis, Claude was clearly not convinced. He secretly glanced to the side, and Ruolan nodded in understanding and walked forward. Seniors, since you've all tried, let me try as well. My origin energy is low, so please don't laugh at me. Wood suddenly waved his hand to stop her. Ruolan, you don't have to take the test. You passed the test by default. Ah, everyone was shocked. Ruolan was also puzzled. Why? Wood smiled. We've seen your file. Miss Ruolan is a battle suit. You can choose whether you want to participate in this mission or not. The military doesn't have any rigid requirements. As soon as he said that, even Randy looked envious. An origin energy battlesuit was really an unattainable profession. During his time at the Listen Academy, Ding Ming only had a rough understanding of some cultivation methods and martial arts. However, Little Rascal had recorded a huge amount of information from the school system and fed it all back to Ding Ming through the space of consciousness. Thus, Ding Ming had a conceptual understanding of battle armor. Battle armor wasn't a simple set of armor, or mecha. It was a combination of the advantages of these equipment, supplemented by technology, origin ability, spells, telekinesis, and even some secret manuals. It was a single piece of equipment specially designed for origin ability users. An excellent battle armor was equivalent to the combination of the most powerful energy, the most effective defense, the most accurate detection, the keenest perception, and the most advanced technology. It was an effective combination and turned into a single combat platform with powerful combat ability. The combat strength of an Origin Energy user who was equipped with it would increase exponentially. Even a beginner Origin Energy user would be able to fight on par with an advanced Origin Energy user once they put on the battle armor. If there were any shortcomings of battle armor, it would be that its structure was too complicated. Many parts were made of rare and precious materials, some of which could only be gathered in the demon world or outer space. As a result, the cost of manufacturing battle armor was extremely high. Most Origin Energy users couldn't afford it. Only large sects, large corporations, and the royal family could afford it. The military, on the other hand, was the main force in equipping battle armor. Origin ability users who researched, created, improved, and created new battle armors were known as Origin ability battle armor masters. This was a profession that was extremely difficult to cultivate, but at the same time, it was a highly respected profession. No one would have thought that Ruo Lan, who looked so young and weak, was actually a battle armor master. Ding Ming suddenly said, "If Miss Rulin isn't participating in the mission, why are you here at the space station?" This question was also on everyone's mind. Yes, why aren't you studying battle armor at school? Why are you here? It should be known that battle suits were usually in the rear. Why would they charge to the front lines? Fortunately, Captain Wood was already explaining, with the strength of the Leaston Academy, it's still not possible to cultivate a battle suit with strong manual control. This was a rather tactful way of saying it. Although the Leaston Academy was the best school in Autumn's City, it still couldn't be compared to the aristocratic schools and star schools of the Empire. This was because it didn't have the financial resources to allow students to design battle armor. At most, it could only conduct theoretical research. To put it bluntly, it was a theorist, not a practitioner. Therefore, this mission is actually an opportunity for Miss Rulin to practice. In order to ensure everyone's safety, the military has decided to provide 2 sets of battle armor for Miss Rulin to modify and use. As for the users, Miss Rulin can choose. Everyone present was smart. As soon as they heard Wood's words, they knew that the so-called armors provided by the military were probably not good stuff. They were probably some old models that were about to be retired and were given to Rulin to practice. But so what? No matter how broken it was still a battle armor. It was something that every Origin ability user dreamed of. The purpose of this test was to let Rulin decide who would use it. Good things should be owned by those who were able to do so. Xingyi's expression suddenly dimmed. Currently, it seemed that Randy, as a statistician, couldn't equip a battle armor. However, other than Randy, she had the lowest score. It was almost impossible for her to get a battle armor. Not to mention, Ding Ming and Xiao Qiu hadn't even tested it yet. "Can we test it again? I didn't use much strength just now," Xingyi shouted. Captain Wood smiled. "I'm sorry, Miss Xingyi. The results are out and can't be changed. If you can enter battlecraft combat in the future, the system will record your data again." Xiao Qiu, who had been silent all this time, stepped forward and said firmly, "I want to try." Captain Wood gestured. "Miss Lan Qiu, please stand inside." Ever since she came to the space station, Xiao Qiu didn't give everyone a good impression. After all, she was skinny and weak. Her body was dirty, and the scars on her face made people uncomfortable. Thus, Randy whispered, "Look at how short she is. I estimate that at most 6,000 points will be her limit." "Xiaoqing, what do you think?" Chu Xiaoqing didn't answer, but she kept a smile on her face. She definitely didn't agree with Randy's judgment. She knew that an ugly woman was brought here by Ding Ming, so her strength was definitely not ordinary. She believed in Ding Ming. There was a saying that people were divided into different circles. People who could walk together with Ding Ming were definitely not weak. The test cylinder's mirror quickly changed color from white to azure. This was clearly the color of ice Origin energy. This was very normal, but what wasn't normal was that the azure mirror actually froze 10 seconds later. Everyone was dumbfounded. The purpose of the cylinder's mirror was to counteract the effect of the tester's origin energy on the surrounding environment. Xiao Qiu was able to freeze the mirror, which meant that her origin energy had already broken through the mirror's preset threshold. Sure enough, the origin energy index on the screen was increasing bit by bit. 3,000 points, 3,300 points, 3,600 points, 3,900 points. Seeing that the trend didn't show any signs of stopping and was very stable, Xing Yi finally extinguished her competitive spirit. Her origin energy index was increasing at a pace of 50 and 100 points, but Xiao Qiu's origin energy index was steadily increasing at a pace of 300 points. It was obvious who was stronger and who was weaker. The results quickly came out. Origin energy index, 5,100 points cultivation technique. Dark Abyss Ice Dust Technique, Physical Fitness. Grade B for Martial Techniques. Dark Ice Force. Dark Ice Fist. Cold Winter Ice Dust Storm. Overall Evaluation Score, 12,800 points. Not only Xing Yi, Randy, and Claude were dumbfounded. Even Chu Xiaoqing and Longming opened their eyes wide to confirm that they hadn't seen wrongly. 5,100 points of Origin Ability Index was actually higher than Longming's. Don't look at the difference of 300 points. The actual difference was quite huge. Everyone knew that Origin Ability Index was getting more and more difficult as one progressed. Chu Xiaoqing was a typical example. She had racked her brain for just a few points of increase. Grade B for Physical Fitness didn't fit Xiao Qiu's image at all. An Ice Element Origin Ability user was even more ferocious than a Quenching System user. As for what level the three martial techniques were, the system couldn't reveal it. Anyway, a score of 12,800 points meant that her martial techniques were definitely not low. Didn't you say that she would at most get 6,000 points? Xing Yi looked at Randy with ridicule. Now it seems like two people with 6,000 points added together are more than that. Long Ming sighed. You can't judge a book by its cover. Randy's face suddenly turned red. I was just joking. It's just a joke. Wuda also looked at Xiao Qiu with some surprise. Elder Feng's words were indeed true. This Lan Xiu was indeed extraordinary. Old Feng had said that Lan Xiu's foundation cultivation technique didn't start from the heart. The Dark Abyss Ice Dust technique was the most orthodox 4-star cultivation technique. It started from the heart. This Lan Xiu didn't go all out and was actually holding back. The patrol fleet that rescued her was really lucky. They actually found a treasure in space. At this moment, only Ding Meng hadn't tested yet. Ding Meng stood in the same place. His expression became very strange. It seemed like he was thinking about something, but it also seemed like he was worried about something. However, he was different from the others because he didn't show any surprise at all. Xiao Qiu had already walked back. She pulled his sleeve. It's your turn, Ding Meng. Chapter 110. The test cylinder didn't give Ding Meng any special feeling. When he walked in, he felt no different from when he was in the sensor cabin. However, he still secretly activated his telekinesis vision so that he could see the real-time information on the screen next to him. He didn't plan to show off, but wouldn't mention the armor, so he felt that he had to fight for it. That thing was definitely a life-saving weapon. Student Ding Meng, please activate your origin energy. Wood's voice sounded. Ding Meng secretly activated his origin energy. This time, he used the principles of the source of heat art to reset the internal structure of the origin. The triangular vortex in his body instantly formed, and his origin energy index displayed on the screen was a standard 3,000 points. However, this wasn't the case for Chu Xiaoqing and the others. First, it was inevitable that the pillar would turn fiery red because Ding Meng was a thermodynamic ability user. Then, his energy would directly soar to 3,000 points. This burst of energy was even more violent than Claude's. Randy couldn't help but whisper to Xing, "Oh no, another fierce person has come. Big brother Ding Meng could easily take care of Hong Mei. How could he be weak?" Xing Yi looked at Xiao Qiu when she said this. She thought that since Ding Meng came with Xiao Qiu should more or less know some details about Ding Meng. However, Xiao Qiu didn't react at all. He just stared at the cylinder in a daze. At this moment, Ding Meng, who was inside the cylinder, was a little anxious. Little Rascal hadn't jumped to conclusions before. This 3-star source of heat art was really too ordinary. Even if Ding Meng activated it to the limit, his origin energy index would only increase to 3,188 points. Its power was really limited. If he really finished the test with 3,188 points, he would most likely not reach the 10,000 combat value. If he didn't reach 10,000 points, he wouldn't be qualified to compete for the Warframe. However, if he used the Diamond Star technique, it would probably be detected by the system. He suddenly had an idea. He remembered that Little Rascal had once said that the origin of the heat source art was the same as the Diamond Astral technique, but its internal structure was far inferior to the Diamond Astral technique. Then, wouldn't it be fine if he only operated 3 points? With this thought in mind, he naturally released his origin energy. In the eyes of Chu Xiaoqing and the others, the test cylinder instantly turned from fiery red to golden yellow, like a giant piece of gold. Swish! The information on the screen changed. Origin Ability Index, 6,000 points. F*CK. Longming couldn't hold it in and directly cursed. Monster, Randy stuttered. Is he still human? Claus's eyes widened. This doesn't make sense. He's from the thermodynamics department. How could he have the explosive power of the electromagnetics department? Chu Xiaoqing's mouth was also wide open. She couldn't believe that a person's origin ability index could double in an instant like Ding Meng. It wasn't that there were no such people, but at the very least, it was almost impossible for such a person to exist in the realm of origin ability users. Crap. Ding Meng could already see everyone's stupefied expressions through his telekinesis vision. I went overboard again. Forget it. I'll just give you a rough explanation. Name, Ding Meng. Gender, male. Age, 20. ID. Then what should I do? Origin Ability Index, 6,000 points. Physical Fitness, a 1 cultivation method. Heat Source Art Martial Technique, 9 forms of Swallow Attack. Overall score, 15,600 points. The light of the test cylinder returned to normal, but the open space was dead silent. Everyone was deeply shocked. 6,000 points of Origin Ability Index was basically the standard of an intermediate warrior. A 1 physical fitness level might not be considered a genius, but how old was Ding Meng? He was only 20 years old. A 20-year-old youth with a physical fitness level that others would need to train hard for dozens of years to achieve. Such an innate talent was something to be proud of. A level was usually the level of Origin Energy Battle Emperor. Every level was divided into 10 levels. Compared to Chu Xiaoqing's B level, it was no longer a difference in level. If you hadn't reached that level, you wouldn't be able to understand the difference. Although everyone was shocked, everyone's mood was different. Xing Yi, Ruo Lan, and Lan Di were the most envious. Such a strong origin ability, such a solid foundation, such a promising future, such a promising future. Chu Xiaoqing, Long Ming, and Claus were silently sad. To think that they were geniuses of their generation. They had been trained since young, had been taught by famous teachers, had the full support of their families, used up all kinds of resources, and taken all kinds of medicine for a long time. But they couldn't even compare to a star-level refugee. And the difference was so big. How could they still have the face to continue living? Of course, if they knew that Ding Meng hadn't even used his full strength, they would probably faint from anger. Only would silently watch Ding Meng walk out of the pillar. He had a smile on his face, but his heart was filled with regret. To be honest, an A-level 1 physical fitness level was higher than his. When he was an Origin Ability user, his Origin Energy Index was only around 3,500 points. A 6,000-point Origin Energy Index plus an A-level body was enough to make him envious. However, Ding Meng's cultivation technique and martial arts were **T. He was a fighter among the 3 stars. This was a classic example of having the qualities of a genius, but walking the path of an ordinary person. No matter how high his future achievements were, They would be limited and not worth looking forward to. However, this was understandable. He was an interstellar refugee. His previous life must have been very difficult. It wasn't easy for a refugee to reach his current level. He could be considered half a genius. However, Ding Ming himself didn't think so. This was because Ding Ming hadn't even shown half of what he had. If he went all out, he was absolutely confident that his combat value would exceed 30,000 points. It wasn't until this moment that Ding Ming truly realized how terrifying the Diamond Star technique was. It was so terrifying that even he felt a sense of awe. Even the Kajia server couldn't detect this technique. Then one thing was certain. Whether it was in the Holy Grail Federation or the Norse Empire, the Diamond Star technique had never appeared before. Currently, the Diamond Star technique was known to be at least a 6-star technique. Then, how many stars was it? Ding Ming didn't dare to hope for 9 or 10 stars. He would be satisfied as long as it reached 7 stars. Wood suddenly clapped his hands and said, "Everyone, the military's testing has come to an end. Before the mission begins, if there are no accidents, everyone will probably stay in the Star Wars world. I believe that everyone would be willing to stay in here and not leave so easily." Chu Shaoqing and the others nodded in unison. The Kajia server could simulate anything they wanted in the Star Combat world. In fact, they had all the cultivation resources they wanted. Compared to cultivating in the real world, it was more than twice as fast as cultivating in the real world. Wood continued, "The system will send you to the corresponding cultivation space based on your data, characteristics, specialties, and evaluation results. Before you are sent, Ruolin, please choose the user of the Warframe." The empty space suddenly quieted down. Everyone looked at Ruolin eagerly, hoping that she would say their names. Facing everyone's expectant eyes, Ruolin just smiled. Actually, everyone's strength is about the same. Combat value and overall score are just numbers after all. They can't completely represent everyone's true strength. As soon as she said this, everyone immediately had a better impression of her. Things like cultivation resources were related to everyone's vital interests. If they were not evenly distributed, it would be easy to cause trouble. The mission had not even started yet, and the team already had conflicts. Then what was the point of playing the game? Ruolin said, "I think it's better to be fair." Randy couldn't help but ask, "How is it fair?" Ruolin glanced at him and smiled. "Randy definitely can't use the Warframe." Randy shrugged and said helplessly, "You don't have to say that. I definitely can't wear it." "Fair, it's indeed fair." Seeing his winking expression, everyone couldn't help but laugh. Ruolin continued, "Miss Chu, it's best not to use the Warframe either." Her choice was actually very reasonable. The Chu family had always been in contact with the military. That was why Chu Shaoqing could accept this mission this time. In addition, she was a tempered body user. When the mission began, she would naturally be the center of the operation. Excluding her now might not seem fair, but at least there would be no favoritism. The others nodded to express their approval. Chu Shaoqing also shrugged slightly to show some regret. However, she still smiled and didn't show any dissatisfaction. Ruolin then said seriously, "Ding Ming must be the first candidate." No one raised any objections to this decision. The high score of 15,600 was there. If anyone was unhappy, they could fight for it. Ruolin glanced around again. "I think Claus is more suitable for the other candidate." This was somewhat surprising. Longming couldn't help but ask why. After Xiao Qiu's score came out, he actually knew that he most likely had no chance with this opportunity. However, he was still a little unhappy that Ruolin chose Claus. After all, Ruolin and Claus were both from the Superconductor Academy. They were originally classmates, so it was inevitable that they would have some selfish motives. Ruolin unexpectedly said seriously, "Our planet TT-12 has limited resources, so there are few talents. It's not easy to have a chance to come in contact with the Warframe. We can't be biased. I think both academies should have a chance to come in contact with it." After her explanation, Longming had nothing to say. Even if Ruolin didn't choose Claus, Longming still had to stop Xiao Qiu with 12,800 points. His chances were very slim. As for star art, she was already thinking about how to cultivate in the next few days. She didn't even think about the warframe at all. Anyway, it wouldn't be her turn. Wood clapped his hands again. Okay, now that the task is done, everyone, let's meet in 3 days. As soon as he finished speaking, 9 beams of light descended from the sky and enveloped everyone. The beams of light slowly shrunk and finally disappeared with a swoosh. Every member was teleported to a different space. Chapter 111. The 3 days mentioned by Wood was far more than that in the Kajia server. Through the magical energy of the inverse source crystal, time was theoretically slowed down. To put it simply, every member in the real world was in a meditative state in the cabin, but their brain cells were still active in the virtual world, so it created the illusion that time had slowed down. This was one of the reasons why Origin Ability users favored the Kajia server. Of course, using the Kajia server was equivalent to using the energy of the inverse source crystal. This kind of opportunity was not available to every Origin Ability user. From another perspective, whether it was for the sake of the mission or for the sake of the talent, the military had shown enough sincerity and capital. At this moment, Ding Meng was standing on a flat runway. This place was similar to an airport where fighter jets took off. The area was at least 100,000 square meters, and the ground was paved with smooth raw stone plates. However, there was nothing, and it was frighteningly empty. This is the training space that the system gave me. Ding Meng was a little dumbfounded. In his imagination, at least, it should be like the Advanced Training Center in Listen Academy. It should be a spacious and bright hall with boxing machines, anti-gravity systems, cold weapons, and so on, so that he could freely practice his martial arts. If he could also eat some amplification agents that could increase his energy absorption, that would be great. But now, there was not even a bird feather in this damn place. How could he practice? Drunken boxing? Don't worry, student Ding Meng. Ruo Lan's figure also appeared on the runway. It seemed that she and Ding Meng were transmitted to the same space. Actually, I came to participate in Miss Chu's mission this time to find a partner. As she spoke, she waved her hand, and a holographic screen appeared in front of her. She flipped through the screen at will, and Ding Meng could see strange models of armor constantly flashing across the screen. Partner? Ding Meng did not understand. Don't you have a partner in the Superconductor Academy? His question made Ruo Lan a little embarrassed. You only saw the glorious side of the Warframe profession, but you did not see the problems behind it. On planet TT-12, and even in the entire Empire, were there few Origin Ability users who learned how to use Warframes? The answer was no. There were as many people as there were hairs on a cow, but there were very few who had truly learned it. Regardless of whether it was the Leaston Academy or the Superconductor Academy, Warframe Masters could only learn theoretical knowledge because the Academy could not provide rare materials to design or modify Warframes. Therefore, they could only enter the virtual world through the International Space Network. The Leaston Academy had virtual cabins that could connect to the Jinfeng network and the Academy's internal network. However, the warframes in the cabins were usually old models. At most, the warframes in the cabins could be used to study the structure and familiarize themselves with the operation. If all these difficulties were overcome, then the question was, who would use the warframe designed by a warframe master like Rulin? Don't even think about people like warriors and war venerables. They don't care about wearing trash. Armor that could be used by Origin Ability users might not be able to meet Ruo Lan's requirements. Ding Meng immediately understood. This Ruo Lan must have a lot of unique understanding in the field of battle armor. She wanted to find an Origin Ability user who had not yet reached the warrior level, but was relatively strong to cooperate with her. No matter how good the armor was, someone had to be able to operate it to see its effects. To save time, let's start now. Ruo Lan flipped through the screen. Ding Meng, are you used to close range or long range combat? She seemed to be worried that Ding Meng would not understand. So she took the initiative to explain close range combat is still mainly done with cold weapons. Long-range combat is mostly done with guns and other technological devices. Ding Ming was obviously used to close-range combat. He might not even know all the things like heat ray guns and ion cannons. Let's do it step by step. Ruo Lan continued. There are many types of close-range combat armor. Speed, strength, defense, attack, damage, protection, support. Which type do you prefer? Ding Ming could not help but say, I like all of them. Ruo Lan smiled. That won't do. Ding Ming asked why. Ruo Lan explained. Think about it for a moment. Is there an origin ability user who can simultaneously master heat, ice, speed of light, biochemistry, electromagnetism, body tempering, body hardening, and weak transformation? Ding Ming immediately understood. In theory, there were such people, but in reality, it was impossible for them to exist. Someone who could cultivate to such a high level was no longer a human, but a god. So you can only choose one type. At most, you can choose two, Ruo Lan explained. 2 is my current limit. Ding Ming thought for a moment, then said, attack and defense then. This had always been his philosophy. The best defense was to defeat the opponent, and a better defensive ability was the foundation for survival. What about weapons? Main weapons? Ruo Lan asked. Ding Ming replied, swords, preferably ancient swords. Ancient swords? Ruo Lan frowned. Do you have any specific requirements? Ding Ming said, ancient swords that could be imbued with origin energy will do. Ruo Lan sighed. This request of yours is a little difficult. Among the equipment that the space station can use, there isn't such a weapon at the moment. But it doesn't matter. Tell us first, and we'll slowly solve these problems. What about secondary weapons? Ding Ming said, carabiner. Ruo Lan's eyes lit up, but her tone became hesitant. A long sword and a dagger. Won't there be a conflict if you use them like that? Ding Ming said, there won't be a conflict. I'm very used to it. The two of them went back and forth for about 10 minutes before Ruo Lan finally decided on the hologram. This is the one. What do you think? This is the prototype. The so-called prototype was a schematic diagram of the internal structure of the armor, presented in the form of a three-dimensional model. Ruo Lan's slender fingers quickly tapped, pulled, and swiped on the screen. A simple humanoid armor was quickly presented. Ding Ming could not recognize the various technological devices and densely packed circuit structures, but he had seen the appearance of this armor before. It was the prototype of the power armor that Sadler used in the underground warship of the Black Gold base. Ding Ming suddenly said, Is this called the Forerunner? Ruo Lan looked at him with some surprise, then nodded. This is the product of the first generation of the Forerunner. It's a type of power armor. Our armor will be developed using it as a prototype. The first modification will be to abandon the hybrid crystal engine because the kinetic energy is too weak. Ding Ming also nodded. He also understood this principle. The power system could not last long, and the energy was weak. Although the crystal system was powerful, the conduction function, synchronization effect, and the material of the load were difficult to fit together. Therefore, it could only form a simple power armor. Power armor was not war armor. War armor needed artificial source cores and silver core stones to change its kinetic system. This was a necessary component of any war armor. Only with these components could a war armor be distinguished from ordinary armor. In layman's terms, the source core was an energy conductor formed by the fusion of a special crystal source and origin energy. When the pilot injected his own origin energy into it, the source core would transform into different types of energy. Silver core stones were usually placed in the power furnace of interstellar warships. A 3-meter square piece of silver core stone could provide a starship like the Sea Sky Pole Island with maximum power for 30 years. Silver core stones were the same as inverse crystals. They were rare materials that were difficult to collect in the universe. They were usually extracted from silver core mines, but with the current level of technology, they could also be artificially created. Artificial silver core stones could not be simply installed in a war armor. That would be a waste of natural resources. Usually, they had to be disassembled repeatedly before being installed in a war armor. With its existence, origin ability users could travel short distances in interstellar space and fight in all kinds of complicated terrains. Even if they were in a difficult situation, they would have enough kinetic energy to wait for rescue or escape. With just these two things, even if it was a very old and shabby armor, the cost of it would be astounding. As a war armor master, Rualan was well-versed in these principles, so she explained as she operated, armor is usually composed of low-grade multi-element alloys. War armor requires mid-grade alloys that are at least 48 elements. This Pioneer needs at least 64 elements, but we can replace it with a completely new material. This material comes from the Frogman Kingdom. It's called rockworm silk. It's essentially a demon material, but it can be fused with 48 elements to create a completely new type of proton fiber. Speaking of this, she was beaming with joy and in high spirits. Dingming suddenly interrupted her. This method must have been developed by you, right? Rualan's fingers immediately froze in the air. After a long time, she sighed. Logically speaking, a war armor master would not hide anything from an origin ability user, but Dingming interrupted her again. You don't have to explain. I understand. Where did this method come from? Where did this material come from? Why do you know all this? Also, how did you know that there was such a thing on the space station? You don't have to tell me the whole process. All I need to know is that this is the war armor you modified, and I'm the one operating it. Rualan was silent for a long time. Then, she reached out a small hand and said sincerely, I'm very happy to be able to become partners with an origin ability user like you, Dingming. Not all origin ability users can understand others like you. Dingming naturally shook her hand to show his trust. After all, no matter what secrets this Rualan had, could they be more important than the K-virus and the Diamond Star technique in his body? This was also why he could understand her. Next, Rualan began to explain the main structure of the war armor in detail, as well as some of the features that he should pay special attention to. Soon, a brand new medium-sized war armor appeared on the screen. This war armor looked a little clumsy from the outside, like a silent city wall. Its whole body had a cold, shiny black luster. Two shiny alloy longswords were hung on its shoulders, a small curved claw blade was hidden at the end of its left arm, and a special condensed energy pistol was attached to its waist. It definitely did not look like a Pioneer. Its design was a little out of place. However, it gave off a different feeling. On the surface, this thing was as still as a rock, but once it moved, it would definitely be fierce, shocking. Dingming could not help but ask, "What's its name?" Rualan's face was full of pride. Its name is Black Rock Knight. Chapter 112. From the hologram, he could only see the appearance of the Black Rock Knight. If he wanted to familiarize himself with it, he would have to operate it himself. At this moment, the system had already created a metal box and placed it on the runway. This was not a real box, but a super-compressed reactor. Armor was usually compressed inside it, so this type of box was called an armor box. According to Rualan's instructions, Dingming first opened the safety on the box. The so-called safety was a palm-sized crystal inlay. It matched perfectly with the lines on Dingming's palm, which meant that this armor was usually exclusive to the user, unless the armor master modified it or changed the settings. After the safety was opened, the box began to emit a strong light, instantly turning into a light pupil that covered Dingming's entire body. On the surface, it looked like it would only take a few seconds to put on the armor, but in fact it was not. Inside the light pupil, the system had already completed the inspection. The mini crystal processor automatically turned on, and the armor material was quickly formed. All kinds of devices were installed in the correct positions according to the armor master's preset values. At the same time, Dingming's body was also connected to the armor. First, two scale-shaped plastic chips were attached to his temples. Don't underestimate these things. These were the Holy Grail Federation's telepathic communication membrane. This thing was a semi-liquid metal called source fluid. It was an information medium that connected the user and the armor. It fed the basic operation and relevant information of the Black Rock Knight back to Ding Ming. At the same time, it formed a wire along the meridians of Ding Ming's body, providing the pilot's data to the crystal processor. Welcome, sir. The Black Rock Knight is willing to serve you. The crystal processor system's voice was very sweet. Ruolan's design was reasonable. Under normal circumstances, men were especially sensitive to the voice of beautiful women, so it would attract a lot of attention. This was especially true when the mind was tired and the mind was not strong enough. A beautiful woman's reminder would often have a very good warning effect. The feeling of wearing armor and piloting armor were completely different. Ding Ming did not have any burden or restraint. He was very relaxed and free, even if this armor was 3 meters tall and weighed 3 tons. However, as soon as the system's greeting rang out, Ding Ming's brain buzzed as a huge amount of information flooded into his brain. This was the amplification effect of the battle armor. The helmet of the Black Rock Knight was equipped with multiple crystal-powered reconnaissance eyes, which could scan an area of 300 meters without any blind spots. They were fed back in various forms such as image, temperature control, ray, sensor, energy jump, energy wave, and so on. This was equivalent to forming multiple views in Ding Ming's brain. Normal people definitely wouldn't be able to adapt to this kind of multi-dimensional field of vision. Any origin ability user who came into contact with the armor for the first time would usually feel dizzy and nauseous. However, Ding Ming had an ability called telekinetic vision. Once he activated it, all these side effects would disappear. From the perspective of perception, the armor gave Ding Ming 2 types of telekinetic vision. Next, ion detection, quantum communication, the current operating status of the armor, database, power system, amplification system, weapon system, even the current environment, weather, temperature, humidity, air composition, oxygen content, wind direction, wind force, all kinds of information were stuffed into Ding Ming's brain. Of course, the crystal processor system still provided a main interface. This was also the screen that interested Ding Ming the most. It showed the real-time field of vision in front of him. As soon as Ding Ming's eyes fell on Ruolan, the interface immediately issued a warning sound. A red circle locked onto Ruolan, and then a big red cross appeared. The interface indicated that she was an ally and also the designer. The system could not execute any orders. Current mode, simple, sensitivity, 30%, damage, 0%, combat value, 0. Ruolan's voice rang out. Try walking a few steps. The Black Rock Knight immediately took a few steps in the open space. It was completely the way Ding Ming usually walked. Ding Ming even ran a few steps. It was impossible to tell that he was a novice at all. He did not know that these few simple steps had already shocked Ruolan to the extreme. Simple mode was the beginner mode. It reduced the overall functionality of the armor to 30%. The reason was that a novice would not be able to adapt to the armor. Even the simplest walk would be difficult for them. Not to mention a novice origin ability user. Even an Origin Energy War sovereign might not be able to walk properly when it was their first time coming into contact with armor. Battle armor was like a new body. Your strength was one thing, but your ability to adapt was another. To put it in simpler terms, if an Origin ability user was a knight, then battle armor would be a warhorse. To be able to become one with the warhorse and move freely, one would need to spend a lot of effort. Now that Ding Ming had shown such a good ability to adapt, Ruolan was both surprised and happy. Just as Randy had said, this guy was indeed a monster. Why is my combat value 0? Ding Ming simply ran around the spaceport's field. Ruolan laughed. You haven't activated your origin energy yet. So that's how it is. Ding Ming secretly activated the Diamond Star technique. This time, he used the first origin. The system immediately refreshed the interface with a large amount of information. At this moment, he clearly felt that the armor seemed to have been injected with a strong vitality. The combat value began to rise rapidly. 500 points, 1,000 points, 1,500 points, 2,000 points. Ruolan's screen was connected to the server, so she could obviously see Ding Meng's information. In the blink of an eye, the combat value increased to 9680 points. Wow! Ding Meng was immediately excited. During the test, his 3 points added up to 15,600 points. Now, 1 point added up to 9,600 points. The armor's benefits were so great. He was excited, but Ruolan was even more excited. Damn, this guy is so abnormal. Ruolan simply shouted, "Change the mode and try again." Advanced normal mode was 1 level higher than simple mode, with a sensitivity of 70%. As soon as he changed the mode, Ding Meng immediately felt the difference. His sense of smell, hearing, and vision had been greatly improved. His perception was stronger, farther, and more accurate. At the same time, the information fed back to his brain and his vision had increased. His processing speed was also faster. But so what? With his current telekinetic vision, he had no problem withstanding the data. Thus, the Black Rock Knight ran wildly on the field like a horse that had just been let loose. Combat value, 20,119 points. Damn! Ding Meng was beyond excited. The armor was indeed a good thing. The improvement was so terrifying. Right, I still have weapons. I'll take them out and try them out. The 2 giant swords that Ruolan had prepared for him were made of 96 yuan alloy. Although they didn't meet Ding Meng's requirement of infusing origin energy, they were still child's play for him. The 2 alloy swords were a bit heavy in his hands. Ding Meng thought for a moment, so he activated the second origin. The heavy feeling instantly became as light as a feather. Ha ha ha, awesome. Ding Meng hadn't laughed so happily for many days. Swoosh, 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 swoosh. The sound of a sharp weapon cutting through the air could be heard on the field. It was quite strange and ear-piercing. Combat value, 33,454 points. Ding Meng was now like a drug addict. He was so immersed in the armor that he forgot about everything else. Ruolan, on the other hand, was dumbfounded. Was this really the kid's first time touching armor? Huh. Ding Meng noticed that there were 3 levels above normal mode. Difficult, hell, and extreme. Damn, since I'm so good, I'll try difficult. Difficult was indeed difficult. As soon as he changed the mode, he finally had a familiar feeling. The feeling of his telekinesis vision shrinking. His senses were everywhere and omnipotent. The alloy sword cut through the air, and the dust particles it carried were clearly visible. He could even distinguish the patterns on the sword and the internal metal composition. The wind blew across the track, and the dust particles seemed to form a cloud. Ruolan, who was standing in the distance, seemed to be wearing purple underwear with a little bear printed on it. This, I'd better not look, combat value, 40,100 points. How could this combat value be increased? Ding Meng was not going to stop. His third origin was also activated. During the test, he had obtained 15,600 points. Of course, there were bonus points for his martial arts and physical fitness. Now that he was wearing the armor, how many points did he have? The Arabic numbers on the screen seemed to have a life of their own. They rose rapidly. 56,632 points. Damn, no wonder people described armor as divine weapons. It was really so. 50,000 combat points had far exceeded the standard of 30,000 points for an intermediate source warrior. This Blackstone Knight was F** King Heaven Defying. Ding Meng began to run wildly again, as if he had been injected with a shot of excitement. At this moment, every step he took was no longer as simple as running. He was completely flying. Every time he flew, he would cover a distance of 30 to 40 meters. When he jumped, he would reach a height of 7 to 8 meters. Fortunately, the field was large enough for him to fly however he wanted. He finally understood why the system sent him to this space. It was necessary to have such a large space so that he could play happily. Ha, I'm flying. Ding Meng was as happy as a little bird. He did not notice that the interface had started to alert him. Warning, warning, you have exceeded the critical value. Ruolan also woke up at this moment. She shouted, stop, quickly. Ding Meng expressed that he could not stop at all. He boldly changed the mode again. It was now Hell mode. As soon as this mode was activated, he had just taken his first step when the system finally flashed a red light. Current damage rate, 32%. Huh? What's going on? Ding Meng was still running, but the three-dimensional model showed that his thighs, arms, and waist were all torn. There were no enemies nearby. You've exceeded the limit. Come back quickly. Ruolin chased after him. There was no need to chase at all. Ding Meng had already run far away. In Ruolin's vision, when Ding Meng took his fifth step, the entire armor began to crackle and disintegrate. The entire body of the armor was burning with blue crystal flames. At a glance, it was obvious that this was the precursor to a big explosion. Sure enough, the armor returned to its light pupil state. Then, it rapidly expanded into a giant sphere. The sphere extended a line of energy that looked like a sharp sword. It only took a few seconds for it to be retracted. Bang! Bang! An earth-shattering sound rang out, and the sports field was completely gone. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.